On a quiet dark night in front of a shelter called Dongyeon Shelter, a strange figure wearing a long cloak stood silently before the shelter gate, waiting patiently. Inside, the shelter guard felt uneasy about the sound of knocking at such a late hour. The guard went to the gate and told the visitor to leave, saying the shelter was full and could not accommodate anyone else. But the visitor, who turned out to be an old woman, insisted hesitantly that she had nowhere else to go. She then showed the guard a mysterious coin and asked him to consider her difficult circumstances. The guard hesitated for a moment in his decision, but eventually reached out and took the coin, signaling his agreement to let her in. The guard opened the gate and asked the strange person to follow him inside. As the moonlight shone on them, it revealed a child by her side, a small boy with striking blue eyes. The guard quietly closed the gate behind them. The night passed, wrapped in silence. He led them to a room and told them he would explain the shelter's rules and duties in the morning, then left the room with a face full of annoyance and boredom. Meanwhile, the old woman thanked him warmly for his kindness toward them. The elderly woman then asked the boy to sit beside her, and gently reassured him, saying it must have been a hard day for him. The boy's face looked tired and anxious as he glanced at the old woman, telling her the day had been hard for her too. The old woman began to show visible concern about something unknown, and advised the boy to sleep and rest, assuring him that his family would come soon. The boy agreed to her request with a small, tired smile. Night fell upon the room as the boy lay in his bed, and the old woman sat beside him, clearly exhausted. She began coughing silently so as not to wake the boy, but was shocked to see her hand stained with blood. Her voice trembled as she whispered to the boy, wishing him happiness. Then she suddenly collapsed onto the bed without moving. At dawn, the boy woke up to a faint sound nearby, and he moved closer, quietly asking if the old woman, Helen, was asleep. But he was shocked to find his hand covered in blood, becoming panicked and terrified. He cried out in alarm, calling the old woman's name, Helen. In the early morning, a woman and a man stood at the door looking at the boy. They seemed disturbed by the incident, as the old woman's death in the shelter had caused a lot of trouble. They wondered what they should do with the boy, until the woman decided to place him with another girl named Pauline due to their similar hair color, making them look like a mother and son in a pitiful scene, while Pauline appeared sad and resigned to what was being said around her. The little boy sat silently and sadly on the bed when Pauline arrived, and the woman told her timing was perfect, as she asked her to take him with her for work starting today. The woman then left the room saying that the place wasn't a charity organization, and at least they would make some money now that the boy was placed with Pauline. It turned out that Dongyeon Shelter appeared on the surface to be a royal charity organization that cared for the homeless. But in reality, it exploited children for profit through something called responsibility fees. The place was described as wicked and vile. Pauline approached the boy shyly and gently introduced herself. She told him her name was Pauline, and that he would be staying with her from now on. The boy didn't look at her, and remained sitting in silence while she appeared sorrowful for him. Pauline spoke kindly, saying that she didn't know exactly what the boy had gone through, but she was sure of one thing. Pauline emphasized that he had to keep living, no matter what. She added gently that if he kept trying, a chance for happiness would come to him one day. She extended her hand to the boy and asked him to come with her, and he cautiously agreed. The boy took her hand, and from then on, he began begging in the streets in Pauline's care. Even though their mother and son relationship was only for the sake of begging, Pauline always took good care of him. She protected him from bullying by other children and threats from vagrants. Because Pauline was always by his side, he never felt alone. 5 years later, Pauline was sitting alone on a bench in the park. She heard a voice calling her name, and it sounded familiar to her. When she turned around, the boy Rowan appeared, smiling and waving at her happily. Now 8 years old. She asked him to sit beside her after his hard day of work, and he kindly replied that she had also worked hard. Suddenly, Rowan told Pauline he had heard the news of her leaving soon. Pauline explained that she would be working as a maid in the mansion of a nobleman. Rowan smiled and said he felt relieved, because he believed Pauline would succeed anywhere she went. Pauline laughed and hugged Rowan, telling him not to worry about her but to worry about himself, while he laughed and playfully complained that she was messing up his hair. After that, he thanked Pauline for the past 5 years she had spent with him. As Rowan began to feel deep sadness, he remembered how Pauline had protected him from the bullying of children and vagrants after Helen's death, when he felt he had lost everything. Then he began crying sadly, saying he should be happy that Pauline was going somewhere better, and that he should congratulate her with all his heart. But he was deeply moved and kept saying that everyone leaves him one by one, starting with his parents, then Helen, and now Pauline, all of them leaving him alone in the end. Pauline gently held his face to make him look directly at her. Pauline gently placed her hands on Rowan's face, assuring him that he wasn't alone, just because someone wasn't beside him right now. She calmly added that true loneliness only exists when a person's heart is empty. Pauline advised Rowan that if he kept holding on to those who had left and quietly looked within himself, he would realize how loved and precious he truly was to everyone, and that whenever he felt alone, he should close his eyes and feel his heart. As she gently assured him that she would always be by his side. On a dark night, Rowan stood alone, realizing that Pauline, who had always been there for him, had truly gone. Then he remembered Pauline's words and told himself he had been told to look into his heart when he didn't want to feel lonely. Rowan focused on his heart and began to feel the presence of the people he loved through the eyes of his heart. Mysterious and dazzling lights gradually surrounded him and began to appear before him. Rowan immersed himself in this unique experience, repeating to himself, "The eyes of the heart." He was deeply amazed by the stunning beauty he saw before him, even though his eyes were closed. With great joy, he realized he could feel and see everything, despite keeping his eyes shut. He began to recall the beloved people who had left him, his mother, father, Helen, and Pauline. He came to a deep understanding that he had never truly been alone at any point in time. Rowan thanked Pauline with love, tears gently rolling down his face. He vowed he would never forget her for the rest of his life. And after some time passed, on a bright morning, a call went out urging everyone to wake up and get ready for work. A full year had passed since Pauline's departure, and the children were getting ready to leave the building and begin their day. Rowan wondered how Pauline was doing, thinking she might still be adjusting to her new job, since he hadn't heard anything about her since then. Since Pauline's departure, Rowan had been working on his own like the other children. Rowan had been assigned to work in Zone 1, the area that brought in the highest income for the shelter, and he was treated relatively well because he earned more than the others. His supervisor, Blake, approached him, encouraging him to do well again today. Blake gently reassured him that there was no need to worry about bad people as long as he was around. Rowan explained that Blake was the supervisor in charge of Zone 1 and had begun treating him kindly after learning about his past. It was also Blake who helped Rowan understand that the clustered lights he had seen before were mana. Rowan smiled softly and expressed his deep trust in Blake. After a while, Rowan realized that Blake was surrounded by a dense light, and he later discovered that Blake was a swordsman who could use mana. Although Blake's mana was strange and dark-colored, Rowan learned that mana was the fundamental source of everything in the world. He also realized that everyone unconsciously inhaled and exhaled mana with each breath, merging with the world and affecting its flow as a result. Rowan sat in his usual spot wearing a black cloak, silently marveling at the beauty he saw around him in deep awe. Rowan sat in deep thought, reflecting on Blake's abilities and those of other people who could use mana in special ways through practices called mana cultivation training. Coins dropped into Rowan's metal donation box as he collected contributions. Rowan smiled gently at the woman who donated, thanking her and telling her that her heart was as kind and beautiful as she was. The woman was surprised and showed great admiration for Rowan's kind words. Rowan decided that he needed to train himself to see both physical forms and mana at the same time. And indeed, he began to clearly see a blend of people's real shapes, along with the flowing colors of mana emanating from them. At first, it was difficult for him to focus on both forms, but he gradually began to get used to it. Rowan felt some dizziness as the two visions overlapped, then a familiar voice called out to him. It was Blake who had arrived, surprised by the amount of donations Rowan had collected in such a short time. Rowan responded with a beautiful smile, saying it was thanks to kind people. Blake gently warned him that there are people who don't like to see others succeed, so he should be more cautious. Rowan assured him that he understood the advice clearly. Before leaving, Blake asked Rowan to report immediately if he saw anyone suspicious, and Rowan agreed while watching him walk away. Rowan decided not to mention what he had seen to Blake, as he had already noticed something strange over the past few days. There were strangers with abnormally dense and radiant mana moving among the crowds. Rowan noticed that they had mana concentrated in their stomachs, just like Blake, and it was very brightly colored. These people would watch him from within the crowd and then suddenly vanish by leaping over buildings. Rowan didn't feel an immediate threat from them, but he decided to keep his ability to see mana a secret, fearing what might happen if someone found out. He thanked a passerby politely, wishing him a good day, when the man gave him a coin. Rowan realized his metal donation box was nearly full and that he would need to request a new one from the shelter. As he headed back suddenly, Rowan noticed a strange, fast movement around him. He quickly looked up and recognized from the color of the mana in the sky that it was the same mysterious people. Rowan realized with concern that they were clearly following him this time. He wondered with confusion about their purpose, since they hadn't been this bold before. He realized they were surrounding him, one behind him and another beside him. Rowan decided he had to try to get back to the shelter quickly somehow. The mysterious people began moving swiftly around him to trap him. Rowan began to jog quickly, wishing he could reach Blake to protect him. He ran at full speed, trying to escape from the people chasing him. Rowan felt deeply anxious, as he saw that they were getting dangerously close to him. Rowan ran in fear, thinking that at this rate they might catch him. Suddenly, someone shouted his name loudly from behind. "Rowan!" It was Blake, running toward him at great speed to save him. Blake leapt high into the air with immense power, heading straight for Rowan. Rowan cried out in relief as Blake reached him. Blake grabbed him firmly and told him to hold on tight. Together they jumped upward, escaping their pursuers. Blake noticed masked individuals chasing them and decided to return quickly to the shelter. He warned Rowan not to drop the money box, otherwise there would be no food today. Blake looked at Rowan when he noticed he wasn't responding and asked with concern why he was suddenly so quiet. When they reached the shelter, Blake told Rowan to go in first. He explained there was a security issue, that the other children would also be returning, and asked Rowan to rest for now. Blake noticed Rowan seemed distracted, so he gently tapped his forehead, telling him to focus and pay attention. With a friendly smile, Blake told Rowan to calm down and head inside, assuring him the others wouldn't be able to reach this place. Rowan came to his senses and began walking inside. Once inside, Rowan stood alone for a moment at the shelter door, feeling tense and confused. Suddenly, he felt a strange sensation and thought to himself that he had seen it before. Rowan clearly understood how mana moved through the body during motion. He remembered how mana concentrated distinctly when someone directed their power to their arms and legs, and how mana would burst and disappear when jumping across rooftops. Rowan confidently decided to try for himself what he had observed and learned from Blake. He began inhaling mana through his breathing. He clearly felt how the mana spread throughout his body after inhaling it. Rowan realized the importance of concentrating mana inside the body and using it when needed. He opened his eyes and felt complete clarity and calm, affirming to himself that he finally understood. With a calm smile, Rowan said he had almost learned how to use mana. He felt great excitement and a strong desire to quickly try out what he had learned. When he reached where everyone was gathered, he heard the other children wondering aloud what was happening around them after they had all suddenly returned to the shelter. The supervisor entered the room and asked the children to remain calm. He explained that he understood their confusion and desire to know why they had been called back so suddenly, but assured them there was no need to worry. He asked them to wait quietly in their rooms until the supervisors finished checking the areas and everyone could return to their duties. But the housing officer called out to Rowan, and he responded attentively. The housing officer calmly told him to gather his things, as it had been decided to move him from his current place. Rowan followed the officer, carrying his small belongings, not knowing where he was going. When they arrived at a large door, the officer asked him to wait outside for a while, then went in to speak with another man. The officer handed the man a file as they spoke in a mysterious conversation. Rowan wondered curiously what they were talking about, but he couldn't hear them due to the distance. He decided to use his new mana control skill and focus on his sense of hearing to listen in on their conversation. Rowan began deeply concentrating on his hearing, using the mana within his body. He managed to hear their conversation and was surprised to learn that he was being transferred from the children's dormitory to the main building. He heard the housing officer explaining that the director favored Rowan because of his handsome appearance. He added that they wanted to keep Rowan safe inside due to today's incident in Zone 1. Rowan heard the two men talking about an incident today involving two individuals from an organization called the Union. Rowan wondered what the Union was and who those two people were. He remembered the incident where masked people chased him and questioned whether they were the ones being referred to. The unfamiliar man noticed Rowan and asked him to follow him inside. Rowan walked behind the man silently, feeling anxious and nervous about what awaited him. The man led Rowan upstairs toward a large office and knocked on the door. Inside the office, an elegant woman sat behind her desk, looking toward them. The man asked Rowan to greet her and told him that this woman would be in charge of his affairs from now on. The man introduced Rowan to Amy, saying he was from the dorm wing, and noted that he couldn't read. He left Rowan with Amy, who began asking him about his age, and he replied that he would be turning 10 soon. Amy expressed surprise that he still couldn't read at his age, so Rowan explained that he had never been taught. She approached him gently and told him she would start teaching him to read beginning tomorrow, asking him to call her teacher, though he could call her big sister when they were alone. Amy added playfully that his face looked very cultured for a child from the dorm wing, to which Rowan replied hesitantly with a yes, not fully understanding what she meant. Rowan asked in confusion why he needed to learn to read, and Amy seemed surprised by his question. In a slightly louder voice, Amy expressed her amazement that he didn't know about reading sessions. She explained that reading sessions are gatherings where someone reads a book aloud to an audience. She added that sometimes new authors organize these sessions themselves. Likewise, nobles often form groups and regularly hold such sessions as a form of refined entertainment. She explained that it's a way of participating in the hobbies of the upper class. Rowan asked if they held such sessions at the shelter, and Amy replied that the shelter sponsors those kinds of events. She told him that if there was ever a truly lucky child, they would host a special reading session. Rowan asked curiously what a special reading was, as mentioned by the teacher. Teacher Amy gently explained that a special reading is when the chosen child reads in front of the person planning to adopt them, then added with a light smirk that this seemed far off for someone like Rowan who couldn't read yet. Amy stared at Rowan in surprise because he didn't show any hesitation or fear. She gently patted his head as a form of encouragement. Then she asked him to follow her, and Rowan eagerly agreed. Amy introduced Rowan to the other children in the room and asked them to treat him well and not cause trouble. She told him his bed was in the far left corner, and Rowan responded that he understood. She asked them to keep quiet and not make any noise. Rowan went toward his personal locker, amazed that he had something like this for the first time. A boy with blue hair approached him and asked in surprise if he was really from the dorm wing, and Rowan replied awkwardly, yes. The blue-haired boy introduced himself as Theo and explained excitedly that it was the first time a child from the dorm wing had joined them. Then he introduced the rest of the children, Noah, Hayden, and Lily. The kids noticed Rowan's troubled expression and reassured him that they wouldn't be mean like the kids in the dorm wing. Theo told him that he no longer needed to beg, as the children in the main building go to the library and reception hall and help with the guests. He also told him that their room is managed by the library. Rowan felt amazed and joyful upon hearing about the existence of books, and the children warmly welcomed him. At night, Rowan lay in his bed reflecting on everything that had happened. He recalled an old memory with Pauline, when she told him that all knowledge could be found in books. He also remembered her saying he was full of curiosity and would surely love books. Rowan admitted to himself his deep desire to read those books. At last, he felt that his wish had come true, and he wished Pauline could know about it. The next morning, Rowan finished reading a story that ended with, and they lived happily ever after. When he finished the book, Amy called him over to check what he had read that day. She asked him to bring the books he had read, and Rowan obediently replied, yes. Amy reviewed the titles of the books Rowan had read, which were simple children's stories, but she suddenly paused with a strange expression, and Rowan noticed it. She asked him in a neutral tone to move on from children's books to the second section, and Rowan thanked her, wondering if he had imagined her odd expression. Rowan felt happy that he would now get to read books from the second section, and asked Amy if he could stay a bit longer to read. She agreed. Rowan excitedly realized that the second section contained adult books, and expected to find interesting things. He wandered enthusiastically among the bookshelves, filled with joy and wonder at the variety and abundance. Suddenly his eyes stopped on a book titled The Union, which sparked his curiosity intensely. Rowan opened the book in front of him and began to examine a map, which showed that the place he lived in was small and isolated. He flipped through the book further and read that the region of Grafton was one of the emirates that had won a long war. As a result, the world had been reorganized into a system consisting of one kingdom and 6 self-governed emirates. The king then established an organization known as the Union, whose goal was to maintain security, peace, and prevent wars. Rowan was deeply moved and wondered if all Union members were truly good and virtuous, given that they had worked for over 200 years for the sake of peace. Rowan began to question why Blake had to flee, despite having good relations with the administrators, and whether begging was forbidden or seen as something bad. While reading, Rowan noticed that the relationship between the Union and the shelter was not good, and that the shelter was hiding a mysterious incident from the past. Rowan began to feel anxious, wondering what the shelter was keeping secret. He continued his daily tasks in the library, and mana now flowed easily around his hands. Rowan used mana smoothly while cleaning the library shelves and placing books back in their proper spots. He finally finished his work and sighed in relief after a lot of effort. Rowan noticed that although his mana control while moving was still not perfect, it had become much easier. He remembered how he used to train by simply sitting and breathing in mana calmly. But with the development of his abilities, he was now able to breathe mana even while moving, and even while reading books. Still, Rowan felt frustrated that the density of mana inside him hadn't increased and remained weak. But he decided he would keep trying, step by step, without rushing. The next day, all the children were gathered in preparation for choosing who would attend the reading session. The deputy director and Rowan's teacher, Amy, appeared, and the deputy began thinking about whom to select for today's session. Theo, Lily, and Noah were chosen. And Rowan was surprised when the deputy also called his name. She kindly explained that he wouldn't have to read today, but she wanted him there because his appearance would help improve the public image. Rowan thanked her deeply for her kind attention. After that, teacher Amy instructed the selected children to change their clothes and gather in the reception hall. Some of the other children felt envious of Rowan, believing his selection wasn't fair due to his lack of experience. When Rowan appeared in his new formal clothes, everyone was impressed by his elegant appearance and praised him enthusiastically. Rowan thanked Theo for his kindness and compliment, while Amy asked him to take his assigned seat. Everyone sat at the long table, waiting for the guests to arrive. When Amy heard a knock at the door, she announced the arrival of the guests and asked everyone to sit up straight in preparation to receive them. The guests entered the reception hall dressed in elegant clothing, while Rowan and the other children sat waiting for them. A young lady stared at Rowan in visible surprise, wondering if he was the same child she had seen on the street. She remembered the day she had seen Rowan collecting donations and how he smiled at her, saying she had a kind and beautiful heart. At that time, the lady had felt both happy and surprised by Rowan's kindness and gentle words. Rowan approached the lady joyfully and greeted her politely, expressing his gratitude for helping him before. The director asked the young lady, whose name was Lady Caroline, if she knew Rowan. Caroline confirmed that she had seen him before, begging at a street intersection. Caroline smiled in amazement at how much more handsome and elegant Rowan had become. The director explained that Rowan had learned to read and write thanks to their support. Caroline excitedly asked if Rowan could read today's story to everyone, even though the director clarified that Rowan was there just to observe. But Caroline insisted kindly, so the director said he could read just the final chapter as a trial. Rowan began reading the final chapter and delivered it in a way that amazed all the attendees. He read with poetic and expressive style, and his tone was calm and touching. Rowan continued reading while everyone remained silent and fully immersed. After some time, Rowan reached a moving part of the story. He introduced it with a professional and heartfelt transition. Rowan read the passage in an emotional tone, voicing the admiration of the book's hero with such depth that it impressed and moved the audience. The ladies were clearly touched by Rowan's words and his moving delivery. Rowan continued reading with great skill and emotion, leaving everyone listening in deep admiration. He read on, saying that it was difficult for the heroine not to notice the hero's gaze and words. While reading, Rowan clearly noticed the reactions of the women around him. Soft sighs, quiet tears rolling down, the gentle sound of teeth biting lower lips, and even the different rhythms of heartbeats. Rowan finished reading as the entire room applauded him with admiration and excitement for his performance. Caroline praised Rowan with great joy, saying it was truly a wonderful moment and a beautifully delivered reading. Rowan thanked everyone with humble gratitude and explained that it was thanks to the director's support that he was able to perform so well, which led Caroline to eagerly ask if she could hear him read again tomorrow. Rowan promised that she could. The next day, during the second session, Rowan was working in the library again, thinking that in the end, the use of mana depended on his own body. While working, a strange book fell and immediately caught his attention. Rowan excitedly decided to search for another book that could help him learn more about mana. As he examined a book titled The Meaning of, Blake suddenly approached him from behind and finished the title aloud. The Meaning of the Castle? Rowan was surprised when Blake approached him and jokingly said he had startled him, even though Rowan had already sensed his presence through mana. Rowan asked him if something was wrong. Blake replied that he had come to see him after hearing about his success at the reading session, and expressed regret that he couldn't attend and hear it in person. Rowan asked if something had happened, and Blake explained that the reason for his absence was the return of the people who had previously chased Rowan, and that he had to deal with them. Rowan laughed and assured Blake that everything would be fine since it was Blake handling the situation, which made Blake laugh happily at Rowan's response. Then Blake told him that, unfortunately, he wouldn't be able to attend the next reading. Rowan remembered that the book he had read earlier mentioned that Blake could be evil, but he thought about how kindly Blake treated him, leaving him unsure whether he should see him as a good person. Rowan felt shy when Blake jokingly held his face, causing him to blush deeply. Rowan reassured Blake, saying there would be other chances to hear him read, and that he felt there would be many times he'd get to read again. Rowan asked Blake to be careful, and Blake smiled and told him to keep working hard on his reading. Blake pointed to the book in Rowan's hands and advised him to read it whenever there were no reading sessions, then left the room, leaving Rowan alone in the library. Rowan stood, worried, thinking about what might happen between Blake and the Union, wondering what a fight between people who could control mana would look like. Rowan grew anxious and questioned whether he was strong enough to stand up against such people. He decided to try using the mana inside him and began breathing and focusing on it deeply. But suddenly, the book he was holding exploded. Its pages scattered across the floor, and it split in two. Rowan bent down sadly to gather the pages, expressing his regret over ruining the book that way. Shortly afterward, the deputy director called him to come in. Rowan entered the office, wondering why she had summoned him. The deputy, with visible nervousness, told him that yesterday's guests had requested that he be the main reader again today, and that they had insisted strongly that he be the only one to read. The deputy seemed hesitant and worried, but finally asked him if he could do it, and Rowan answered with gentle confidence that he would try and that she shouldn't worry. Later, in the main hall, the deputy announced to the gathered children that there would be a special reader for a rare occasion. As the children stood ready for the announcement, it was announced that the special reading this time would be done by Theo, not Rowan. Theo was surprised and asked in disbelief if he had really been chosen. The staff member and everyone else encouraged him and congratulated him. Rowan approached Theo and kindly congratulated him. Theo thanked him, although he felt a sudden sense that the choice had been expected to go to Rowan. Theo smiled gratefully at Rowan and told him he reads very well and would surely go somewhere better soon. Shortly after, everyone bid Theo farewell as he left with one of the supervisors, while they watched from a distance, wishing him the best. Rowan and the other children watched Theo from the window and said sadly that he was a good kid. Although they felt a bit disappointed at his departure, that feeling quickly faded. In the next reading session, Rowan appeared again, reading with a moving and emotional tone, which made everyone listen with deep focus. The deputy director told Rowan that today he would read twice, once in the morning and again in the afternoon. Rowan asked, surprised, if he really had to do it twice in one day. She gently replied that although it was difficult, everyone wanted to hear his reading. Rowan smiled politely and said he was happy that everyone liked his reading, then hesitated a little before speaking. He then kindly and jokingly asked if he could go outside for a bit between the readings, saying he felt emotionally drained. The deputy director smiled and agreed, but she clearly warned him not to go far and told him to stay within the building's courtyard, and Rowan assured her that he understood. Rowan went out to the back courtyard, enjoying the fresh air. He began to focus and breathe deeply, attempting to use mana in a special way. Rowan clearly imagined the energy pathways within his body and how they connected joints and muscles, based on what he had read in the books. He felt the mana flow inside him powerfully and continuously. Rowan realized that strong willpower was the most important factor in moving mana within the body. Mana burst out around him with great force, confirming the success of his experiment. Rowan stood confidently, feeling the mana surround and flow through him strongly. After finishing his training, Rowan felt relieved, but he realized that the problem still lay in the low density of mana within his body. Rowan calmly decided not to rush, and to avoid developing any weaknesses in using mana like others had. He remembered the day when Blake carried him and brought him to the shelter with great difficulty. He also recalled how his pursuers from the Union had suffered from depleted energy during the chase, indicating a common weakness in stored mana usage. Rowan wondered whether using stored mana would be the right solution. He also thought about the possibility of using external mana as if it were his own. Rowan picked up a small leaf and wondered if he could control it using mana. He used mana to lift the leaf gently in front of him. Rowan smiled with joy at the success of his experiment, saying to himself that this was exactly what he had expected. It was announced that Lily had been selected for the special reading this time, and everyone clapped warmly to congratulate her. The children congratulated Lily and wished her a happy life, while she looked shy and thankful. Lily approached Rowan with clear hesitation, and Rowan asked if she wanted to say something. Lily shyly confessed that she actually admired Rowan. But some of the other children were surprised that Rowan wasn't chosen despite how exceptional he was. One child sarcastically commented that the administration would never let Rowan leave because he brings them too much money. Lily was affected by what she heard and looked saddened as she softly whispered Rowan's name. Rowan gently asked Lily if she had said something, but she quickly pulled back and replied that it was nothing important. Rowan stood puzzled as he watched Lily leave with her friends, wondering what had just happened. While he looked out the window, the children laughed and teased Lily, saying her face had turned red from embarrassment, while Rowan wondered whether, if he ever left the shelter, he might end up with a good family too. Rowan thought that if he ventured out into the outside world, he could read more books and discover new things that might help him improve his mana control. The next day, in the main building's courtyard, Rowan continued his mana control training. Rowan felt it was getting easier to control objects using mana, and affirmed to himself that he would improve even more with continued practice. Suddenly, Rowan felt something strange around him. He saw someone fall from the top of the shelter wall. Rowan was shocked to see that the injured person was the supervisor who had previously brought him to the main building. He noticed that the supervisor's mana was extremely weak and gradually fading. Rowan tried to approach him to check on him, but another staff member named Igor appeared and called out to the supervisor, rushing to help him. As the two men were leaving, Rowan overheard the supervisor angrily say that it was those bastards from the Union again. The other man turned to Rowan and told him to pretend he hadn't seen anything and ordered him to return inside immediately. Rowan felt that something was wrong and suspicious about the whole situation. Moments later, Amy came in and suddenly announced the cancellation of the afternoon special reading. The children were very confused by the sudden decision, but she firmly insisted that they return to their rooms at once. While everyone was still confused, the staff member called out to Rowan specifically. She approached him with a serious expression and quietly told him to get ready, adding firmly that he had a special reading. Rowan felt anxious as he prepared, and he remembered Amy and wondered about the strange look on her face. Amy seemed different from usual, which made him even more worried. Rowan became convinced that the sudden cancellation of the reading was related to the supervisor's incident, and he cautiously wondered whether the union had something to do with it. Rowan began walking through the shelter's hallways toward Teacher Amy, feeling certain that something strange was going on. He gently called out to Amy from behind, and directly asked if they were going to meet the sponsor now, but he noticed that something unusual was happening inside the shelter. Amy snapped out of her daze and told him with confusion to follow her. As they walked, Rowan curiously asked if Lady Caroline was the one who requested to adopt him, but Amy seriously replied that it was someone else who made the request. They exited the building and headed toward a strange external structure, finally arriving at the annex, which appeared dark and mysterious. Rowan sensed a strange dark mana filling the place, which made him uneasy. At the door, they were greeted by Supervisor Igor, who welcomed Rowan and told them to enter quickly because they were in a hurry. Rowan noticed the odd expression on Amy's face, just before the door was closed behind them, leaving Amy outside. Inside the building, which was oddly dark and windowless, Rowan felt uncomfortable and decided to stay alert. Suddenly, Rowan heard the deputy director speaking with someone about the urgency of completing something before their departure, which heightened his anxiety. He noticed a large magical circle on the ground, and was instructed to sit in a specific chair and begin reading. Rowan sat down, holding the book with a deep sense of tension. He suddenly saw a large pit in the ground filled with dense and strange mana, which shocked and frightened him, as it was the first time he had seen mana in such quantity. A man told him to begin reading, and Rowan immediately started to read. As he read, Rowan noticed that the mana in the pit was strange and unstable, and he felt the presence of another, invisible and extremely powerful mana. While reading, Rowan experienced strange and intense emotions, being transferred to him through the text he was reciting. Rowan realized with growing concern that the dense mana in front of him was listening to the reading and reacting to it. Suddenly, he felt the mana inside his body being forcefully pulled toward the pit, and he panicked, unwilling to be completely drained by it. He decided he had to resist and stay focused until Union forces arrived to save him. He resolved to concentrate and try to absorb the mana flowing around him, and control it to protect himself and regain his balance. Rowan continued to focus intensely as he read, trying to fully control the flow of mana around him. Mana surged powerfully from his body, forming waves of energy that spread throughout the room. Despite the tension, Rowan succeeded in completely controlling the flow of mana, and told himself confidently that he had finally done it. He kept reading in a calm tone, trying to buy more time, his face showing a forced calmness. Rowan was fully aware that he needed to stall a bit longer, since he didn't sense any new mana approaching, meaning the Union hadn't yet reached the building. Outside the room, those present began to notice that the reading was taking longer than usual, and they expressed concern that the fruit should have ripened by now. Some of them decided to check the situation immediately. Meanwhile, Rowan sensed strange movement, and realized that the director of the shelter and his group had begun to move. Suddenly, Rowan noticed they were in the room with him. One of the directors burst into the room violently and blocked the door with a huge statue. After successfully sealing the door, he ran toward the basement of the building, cursing and shouting angrily. Rowan stood stunned by the noise and asked himself worriedly what was happening and why everyone was heading to the basement. He noticed that all those present had moved downstairs and cautiously wondered why they were going there. In the basement, a chaotic scene unfolded as a violent confrontation broke out. Supervisor Igor slapped one of the other staff members. He began yelling furiously, accusing them of doing something wrong and of trying to escape. The directors tried to defend themselves with unconvincing excuses as Rowan cautiously approached the area. Rowan was shocked to see a grotesque statue shaped like a tree made from real human bodies, which filled him with terror. He quickly realized that this was no ordinary tree, but a horrifying and twisted structure made up of imprisoned humans. As Rowan stepped closer, he was deeply shaken to recognize a familiar face among the preserved ones, the face of Mother Pauline. Rowan was stunned by what he saw and couldn't fully comprehend it yet. At that moment, Supervisor Igor shouted in rage, accusing the staff member of being a traitor. Then Blake's voice interrupted them, furious and accusing them of committing monstrous crimes and killing the other directors, to which Igor responded that the staff had tampered with something. Igor then pulled out a strange fruit and said the staff members had suddenly disappeared, and when he tracked them, he found this, explaining that the fruit had deteriorated badly. Then Igor pointed at Rowan and said he had brought him to produce more fruit before the Union arrived, but things had spiraled out of control. At that moment, Blake prepared to confront the situation in anger, while Igor silently watched him, performing something mysterious and dangerous in front of the horrific human-shaped statue. Rowan remembered how he used to wonder why Blake, the swordsman, didn't carry a sword. Blake had once smiled and explained that he needed it for something else at the time. Now, Blake appeared holding a strange weapon stained with blood, which made Rowan anxious. As Igor approached Rowan, trying to restrain him forcefully, Blake was startled by a loud scream that made him turn in shock. Blake's face was bloodied and visibly distressed. Suddenly, a massive surge of power erupted from Rowan, who stood at the center of a vortex of dense blue mana. Blake was stunned by the scene and asked anxiously what was happening. Rowan stood confidently, surrounded by mana, and Blake realized in astonishment that Rowan had learned to use mana with great strength. Rowan turned toward the strange statue, leaving Blake in disbelief. He looked at the group of preserved human bodies in front of him and recognized Pauline among them, overcome with fear and sorrow. Rowan gently approached Pauline's face and touched it softly, his eyes filling with tears of grief. He placed his hand over Pauline's heart, trying to connect with the mana. A tremendous force burst from his body and pierced through the statue, causing mana to surge from him violently and shaking the entire structure. At that moment, terrifying memories that Rowan had never recalled before came flooding back, and he found himself surrounded by fire and falling corpses. He saw himself standing alone amidst the devastation, stunned and questioning what exactly had happened. Then he saw a different version of himself and, shocked, wondered if that person was actually his older self. Rowan tried to stop what was happening, saying that he needed more time. He felt something strange, a warm, familiar mana gently flowing into him. He began to clearly remember Pauline with tenderness and said he had forgotten those warm memories. Her words echoed in his mind, reminding him that true loneliness is when the heart is empty. He remembered her advice to close his eyes and look inside his heart to feel the love others have for him. Rowan felt that this mana was trying to remind him not to lose what is precious, and he realized that his memories and love for Pauline were eternal. While he was immersed in those warm emotions, Blake suddenly broke the moment, pointing his sword at Rowan and asking coldly, with sarcastic calm, if he was finished with his touching reunion. Blake stood in front of Rowan, saying that he had waited for him a long time, despite being short on time, and told him he wanted to take him along because he was smarter than he appeared. Blake explained that things had gotten complicated because of some fools, but even so, he still wanted to ask him one last thing. Blake asked Rowan if he wanted to come with him. Then he continued his threat, saying that if Rowan didn't accept, he would kill him quietly, though he admitted that killing him would be a huge waste. Rowan hesitantly asked where they would go. Blake simply replied that they were going to another farm where children were managed until they turned into trees, like the one Rowan had seen. He explained that they would learn how to manage and care for these children until they became trees. Then Blake told Rowan clearly that he would become a member of an organization called Ratil, and explained that this organization used dark magic to reshape the world, and they were devoted servants of its leader. Rowan asked Blake directly if he was the one who had created that horrifying tree. Blake sharply replied that he didn't have that kind of power, and that he merely observed and studied what the high priest had created. He then asked Rowan again, quickly this time, if he would come with him, because time was running out, but Rowan calmly said he didn't want to go. Blake immediately decided he had no choice but to kill Rowan, and raised his sword to strike. But in that moment, a tremendous force burst from Rowan, completely stopping the sword's movement, leaving Blake shocked that his blade wouldn't move. In disbelief, Rowan asked Blake if he was the one who killed Mother Pauline. Blake responded with mockery, asking if he wanted revenge for her. Rowan said firmly that in that case, he would not let Blake live. Blake didn't understand what was happening and was stunned by Rowan's sudden strength. Rowan struck Blake with a powerful mana-infused blow and told him coldly that he should have dodged it. Blake tried to curse in return, but Rowan silenced him quickly, saying he hoped he wouldn't feel wronged. Blake fell dead, and Rowan said coldly that he had brought this upon himself. Rowan stood firmly in front of the human tree statue, saying he would never forgive people like them. Then Rowan felt the presence of many people. Coming toward him from the stairs, members of the Union arrived, and Deputy Commander Oscar ordered his men to search the entire place, not leaving a single corner unchecked. Oscar suddenly noticed a child in the room, and was surprised, questioning his strange ability to move objects from a distance. He asked Rowan if he had learned magic in the Ratil organization, but Rowan confidently answered that he had learned no magic and was not a member of Ratil. And when Oscar asked about the source of his mana control, Rowan replied calmly and confidently that he had taught himself. Oscar began to doubt Rowan's words, saying that it was impossible, but at the same time, he didn't seem like someone who was lying. Oscar introduced himself, saying his name was Oscar, and that he was the commander of the Union's Faith Division. Rowan calmly and confidently replied that his name was Rowan and demonstrated his solid knowledge of the Union and the Faith Division, noting it was the Union's first unit, and even recognized Oscar's rank as a scholar just by looking at his uniform. Oscar smiled and said with a kind spirit that Rowan was truly a unique person. Before they left the place, he asked him to retrieve the blade. Oscar was surprised by Rowan's skill in using mana, that he could wield it this way while being merely a 10-year-old child. A man came to report the investigation results to Oscar, stating that the Tree of Bodies appeared to have been formed recently, less than 2 years ago. But the enchantment had been cancelled for some reason. Oscar wondered who might have been responsible for cancelling the spell, suspecting that perhaps a high priest had visited the site. As Rowan gazed at the human tree with sorrow, the other man explained that the condition of the fruit was also strange and required further study. Rowan looked sadly at Theo's face and softly said he was sorry, that he should have played with him more. He also quietly expressed his sorrow for Lily, and as Commander Oscar approached, Rowan asked him coldly how many human trees he had seen in his life, and if he would see even more of them in the future. Oscar, surprised by Rowan's composure, thought to himself that he expected the boy to be drowning in grief. He explained that the Union's mission was to eliminate Ratil's farms. Oscar noted that Rowan's voice lacked emotion, a sign of maturity despite his young age. Rowan confidently and clearly asked Oscar if he could go with him. Oscar realized Rowan was truly affected, but didn't easily show his emotions. Oscar calmly replied that the investigation took priority for now, and asked Rowan to follow him. Rowan began walking quietly behind Oscar, leaving the place behind. As they walked, Rowan noticed the corpse of a priest on the ground and approached it curiously. Rowan picked up something that looked like a coin from the priest's clothes. It was the coin that once belonged to Helen. Outside the building, a union member told Oscar that there were no casualties on their side. He added that 13 members of Ratil had been killed, along with 3 from the shelter, and that 2 had escaped. He also confirmed that the high priests and directors had only intervened at the beginning of the ritual. The cause of the ritual's collapse was still unknown, and they had requested additional support. Oscar thanked his men, telling them they had done well. Oscar then asked Rowan where he felt most comfortable. Rowan replied clearly, "The library," so Oscar advised him to choose a different place where they could continue their talk. Oscar asked Rowan to lead the way and walk ahead of him. Inside the library, Oscar noticed the lack of books on mana training or magic usage. He asked Rowan in surprise how he had learned to use mana on his own. Rowan replied very simply, that he had discovered the method himself, which made Oscar even more surprised. Rowan confirmed proudly, saying, "Because I'm very smart." Oscar began the conversation by telling Rowan that he could see he was honest, that he didn't make up lies, and that he truly was intelligent. Oscar asked Rowan to tell him everything that had happened to him from the beginning. Rowan began recalling his past from the moment he arrived at the shelter. He told Oscar that he believed Mother Pauline was the one who granted him this strange power. Oscar understood what Rowan meant, but said there were still many things he didn't yet comprehend. Meanwhile, he thought to himself about Rowan's incredible abilities, how he had managed to kill skilled fighters like Blake without prior training, and likely had also disrupted the ritual himself. He could use telekinesis without incantations or rituals, and didn't seem to tire, which amazed Oscar deeply. Rowan directly asked Oscar about the truth behind the tree he had seen earlier. Oscar explained that the tree was a dark magic tool that used human life as its foundation, and that the evil organization Ratil had created it. He also explained that the fruit is concentrated, powerful mana, the essence of life, and extremely valuable. Oscar showed Rowan an unfinished fruit, and explained that it's consumed to rapidly increase the amount of mana in the body, which is why it's so highly priced on the black market. When Rowan asked about the purpose of the reading sessions, Oscar replied that they were part of a magical ritual intended to stabilize the tree and improve the fruit's quality. Rowan remembered how the tree seemed to listen to him during the reading, as if it was fully engaged in what he was saying. Rowan commented sadly that this made sense, as they were once humans with hearts before they were turned into that tree. Oscar agreed with him, saying he was right, and that the Union shared the same view. Rowan politely asked to continue asking questions, and Oscar allowed it. Rowan asked about the nature of telekinesis, and Oscar explained that it's a type of magic that uses mana to move objects at a distance, like he does with his sword. Rowan told Oscar he still didn't know much about magic, despite Oscar realizing that Rowan's telekinetic ability was already at a high level. Oscar asked Rowan again about his age, and Rowan replied that he would soon turn 10, though he was still only 9. Oscar cautiously asked why Rowan trusted the Union, after being betrayed by people who were close to him. Rowan calmly answered that he didn't fully trust the Union, but he trusted his instincts, which told him that Oscar was a kind and radiant person. Oscar was surprised by Rowan describing him as a bright and pure person, and considered that trusting them for that reason was a little reckless. Rowan said he was good at reading people, but Oscar stated firmly that he couldn't make a quick decision about taking Rowan with them. Rowan tried to convince Oscar that he was skilled in using mana and telekinesis, but Oscar explained firmly that there were more important factors than just ability. Rowan felt disappointed and saddened by what Oscar said. Oscar noticed Rowan's sadness and tried to clarify his position, saying the issue wasn't with Rowan himself. He added that granting Rowan an exception wasn't easy, especially since he was still very young. Rowan asked Oscar in surprise whether age was more important than ability to him. Oscar admitted that Rowan's magical talent was exceptional, and that he had defeated both Edgar and Blake, but that this was a different matter. He explained that the Union makes many decisions, and those decisions are usually based on experience, which comes with age. Rowan asked Oscar seriously if he thought he lacked wisdom and experience because of his young age. Oscar replied that he hadn't said that exactly, but he'd only known Rowan for a few hours. Oscar decided to treat the situation like a mock interview and asked Rowan to answer his questions clearly. He asked Rowan why he killed Edgar. Rowan answered honestly that he did it because Edgar had already killed the supervisors in his path, and that Igor was about to crush his skull, so he couldn't afford to wait. Oscar pointed out that Rowan had killed 2 people and asked if his emotions clouded his judgment or if it was driven by personal anger. Rowan responded clearly that he would never deny the crimes he committed out of emotion and was fully ready to face the consequences of his actions. He added that his anger and sadness actually helped him reach a more decisive and just decision. When Oscar asked what his decision was based on, Rowan firmly stated that Edgar had sacrificed the lives of many. He added that even if Edgar had repented, no one would forgive him for what he had done. Rowan explained sadly that he had no right to offer them a second chance at life. Oscar then asked seriously if Rowan believed he had the right to kill. Rowan answered confidently and calmly that he decided to kill them because he believed it was just, and he had the power to carry it out. He added that if asked to take responsibility for what had happened, he would never object. Oscar asked once again whether Rowan really had to kill them. Rowan answered clearly that someone had to do it. He then asked, with visible emotion, whether that wasn't the whole point of the Union in the first place. Oscar was stunned and couldn't respond immediately. He began to explain that the Union was a group founded for a noble and essential purpose. He said the Union's true goal was to preserve peace and happiness everywhere. He added that seeing people live safely and joyfully was the ideal the Union always strove for. Oscar clarified that he bore the responsibility of protecting this world, even if that mission often seemed impossible. Oscar reflected on Rowan's answer, describing it as very mature and calm, far beyond what he expected from someone his age. He then asked Rowan if he had heard of the Grave Organization, a dark group that threatened the kingdom's peace, of which Ratil was only one part. Oscar explained that the Union was currently working to dismantle Ratil's farms and restructure its own branches, though he wasn't sure how long that would take. However, if Rowan helped them, things might change. Rowan asked in surprise what Oscar meant, and Oscar answered clearly that he should come to the Union. Oscar told Rowan to prove his abilities, and after that, he would accept him as a member of the Union. Oscar wondered silently whether he was placing too much hope in Rowan. Outside, Rowan stood beside Oscar at the gates of the shelter, ready for a new chapter in his life. Oscar clarified that the Ratil organization had cruelly exploited innocent beggars and orphans, and that they had collaborated with the shelter directors to carry out horrifying human sacrifice rituals. He added that the Union, the shield and sword of the kingdom, had destroyed the secret Ratil organization and intended to restore Dongyun's shelter to its proper state. That was all for now, and with the first light of dawn, they would head west to rendezvous with the 4th Division. The commander called out directly to Sienna, and she promptly answered the call. Rowan clearly noticed mana flowing around her in fog-like waves. Oscar introduced Rowan to Sienna, explaining that he was a direct witness to the events and instructing her to escort him safely to Union headquarters. Sienna introduced herself to Rowan and said the journey would take about 15 days, and that he should bring whatever belongings he had. Rowan eagerly asked Sienna if she was one of the Jinn, and she explained that she was from the Dark Jinn. Rowan remarked in surprise that he thought Dark Jinn would look gloomier or darker, but she looked very bright. He quickly apologized if his words were rude, explaining that he simply felt something mysterious about her. Sienna quietly replied that the reason might be due to Rowan's own bloodline, which surprised him. The two mounted the horse, ready to depart, and Oscar wished Rowan a safe journey. Rowan bid everyone farewell, and wished them safe arrivals as well. The two rode off swiftly on horseback, beginning their long journey. That evening, Rowan and Sienna sat by the campfire to rest for a bit. Sienna gave Rowan a small sheath for his knife, saying she thought he might need it during their travels. Rowan thanked her and mentioned that he had been wondering what she was doing earlier in the trip. He asked politely if he could call her Big Sister, to which Sienna hesitantly replied that it might be a bit much. Rowan hesitated, a little embarrassed, while Sienna looked at him curiously. Rowan cheerfully suggested calling her Senor instead, since he would soon be joining the Union. Sienna was caught off guard and blushed a little, then quietly agreed, saying he could do as he pleased. The two continued sitting together calmly around the fire. Sienna told Rowan that his ability was very unique. Rowan asked in confusion if his power was called mental magic, like Oscar had said. She replied that it was probably better if people believed that. Rowan asked in surprise what his power really was. Sienna replied that she hadn't seen anything like it before either. Sienna explained that his power seemed to directly touch and control mana without using any incantations or rituals, and added that only the ancient Jinn once had that kind of ability. She said they were the original race of the Jinn, before branching off into types like the Dark Jinn. Then, looking at Rowan, she added that judging by the color of his eyes, his parents must have been truly extraordinary people. Rowan remembered his parents and wondered about who they were and what they had been like. The next morning, Rowan continued his journey with Sienna on horseback. Sienna called out to Rowan to come closer, while he seemed a bit distracted. She pointed to a distant location and told him that the Union headquarters was located there. The full view of the grand and beautifully organized Union City came into sight. Sienna explained to Rowan that the city was divided into a residential area and a commercial area. She added that the city brings together people from different regions and races. She said that the Union is the strongest fortress on the continent, not just because of its walls, but because it gathers the strongest individuals. That's why it's called the Sword and the Tome of the Continent. It protects the kingdom and its citizens from Grave and other organizations. Rowan showed understanding and interest in what Sienna was saying. Sienna announced that they had finally arrived. She told Rowan that this place would be his home from now on. They walked together into the Union headquarters. A Union officer welcomed Sienna and thanked her for her efforts. Sienna introduced Rowan to the head of the administration office in the Union, Lazarus. Lazarus greeted Rowan and asked if he was indeed the boy named Rowan. He kindly asked Rowan to come with him so they could speak for a bit. Rowan and Lazarus sat inside a very elegant and luxurious office. Rowan felt the room was unusually bright and recalled the description of the Union as a military power. He remembered Sienna's words describing the Union as a great protective force, that its military strength safeguards the kingdom, oversees the affairs of the 6 Emirates, and protects citizens from Grave. Rowan noticed how radiant and commanding Lazarus's presence was, wondering how powerful he really was. Lazarus asked Rowan to extend his hand a little. He gently held it and began to use mana. Rowan was surprised and felt a kind of mana power he had never experienced before. He noticed that Lazarus used a completely different and extremely precise method of interacting with mana. Rowan clearly realized that this kind of mana control was far more refined and unlike anything he had known. He felt that he only knew a very small fraction of the world of mana. Rowan wondered in amazement if there were many others like Lazarus who could control mana with such precision. Lazarus asked Rowan about the brooch that was found with him, explaining that the report stated it belonged to the deputy director of the shelter. Rowan explained to Lazarus that the brooch wasn't stolen. It originally belonged to his grandmother. When Rowan extended his hand to show the brooch to Lazarus, he suddenly felt something strange. Rowan's expression changed with great surprise as he sensed something unnatural happening. He suddenly realized he couldn't pull his hand away from Lazarus and felt their mana intertwining. Rowan felt that Lazarus's control over mana was extremely precise and that every movement carried great power. He understood that if he could overcome the gravitational and magical pull, he might be able to free his hand. And indeed, Rowan succeeded in releasing himself easily from Lazarus's grip using mana. Lazarus was amazed by Rowan's ability and said in astonishment that it was impressive. He expressed deep admiration for Rowan's ability to use telekinesis without incantations. Rowan felt a bit of regret for trying to imitate Lazarus's mana technique, but at the same time, he was sure Lazarus was a good person. Lazarus examined the brooch, wondering internally about something. While inspecting the brooch, Rowan noticed that Lazarus's mana wavered slightly in an unusual way. Lazarus praised the beauty of the brooch, and Rowan hesitantly asked if he could ask a question. Rowan asked Lazarus if he was the strongest person in the Union. Lazarus laughed and said he was just an old man who helped Union members, like a raccoon. Rowan innocently said Lazarus didn't resemble a raccoon at all, which made Lazarus laugh more and explain it was just a figure of speech. Lazarus began explaining to Rowan that there were 7 division leaders in the Union, and all of them possessed incredible power. He added that above them all was the Supreme Commander, a person with such extraordinary strength that Lazarus himself seemed weak by comparison. Lazarus asked if that information was enough for now, and Rowan politely asked if he could visit again later if he had more questions. As Rowan was leaving, he thought to himself that Lazarus was kind, strong, and a good person, and he felt happy to be part of the Union. Rowan arrived at the Union School with Sienna, who told him that this would be his residence from now on. Rowan asked about the nature of the Union School, and Sienna explained that the school houses the children of Union members, while their parents are away on missions. Sienna added that students receive basic education and training because they are considered future Union candidates. She clarified that the school doesn't teach specialized techniques, only the fundamentals of magic and swordsmanship. Rowan expressed great admiration for the Union School. He looked very happy as he thought about the idea of attending school. Sienna smiled quietly as she observed Rowan's joy. The two stood in front of the school's large gate, ready to enter. The grand view of the luxurious Union School building appeared before them from the outside. Rowan appeared in his official school uniform, and a woman told him that the outfit suited him very well. Rowan thanked her politely. Rowan politely asked the teacher if she was really a teacher. She smiled and replied that she was Daphne, head of academic affairs and taught languages. The teacher handed Rowan the schedule for the first-year courses and explained that he could choose some elective subjects in addition to the core curriculum. Rowan felt excited as he selected a large number of interesting subjects like basic magic, swordsmanship, astronomy, and others. Rowan eagerly said he had enrolled in all the subjects he chose. Daphne responded hesitantly that she would check it. Daphne was very surprised by the large number of courses Rowan had selected. She gently advised him that the schedule would be far too heavy for him. She explained that there would be assignments and exams, so it would be difficult. Rowan tilted his head in confusion at what she said. He asked Daphne in surprise, "Why is studying hard?" which shocked her. Daphne said in amazement that she would discuss the matter with the other teachers and suggested they head now to his first class. Internally, she thought Rowan was a truly unique child. The door to the large hall opened for them to enter. Rowan entered the hall and saw students already seated at their desks. Rowan calmly looked toward the students. He noticed that the students had far denser mana than he did. Rowan was certain within himself that the issue lay in his own body, not anything else. Daphne introduced Rowan to the class and said he was a new student who joined a bit late. She asked him to introduce himself to everyone. Rowan stood in front of the students and began to feel like the situation resembled his past reading performances. He smiled gently, preparing to speak. Rowan introduced himself by saying, "I'm Rowan from Dongyun Shelter." He kindly asked them to take good care of him. Daphne seemed a bit surprised by Rowan's words and his manner. She apologized after realizing she had spaced out a little and asked Rowan to take his seat. Rowan calmly walked to his assigned desk, while the students whispered among themselves. He sat down and placed his book on the table. Daphne announced to the class that today they would be reading a fantasy story from the literature book, and she asked Rowan to read. Rowan confidently replied that he had learned to read at the shelter, so Daphne asked everyone to listen carefully to him. When Rowan opened the book, he was slightly surprised by what he saw. It was one of the books that Amy had recommended to him when he was still at the shelter. Rowan remembered that he had read this fantasy story before when he was at the shelter. He wondered if this was the same story he had once read with teacher Amy. The students reacted to the story with amazement, especially when he reached the part about the girl who tried to remove the hair growing on her knees. Rowan continued reading and mentioned that the hair grew thicker every time the girl tried to remove it. He wondered to himself why Amy's expression had changed when she read this story with him in the past. He also wondered if Amy had unconsciously identified with the girl who had hidden hair. Perhaps she too was hiding something related to the Ratil organization. Rowan felt this idea was nothing more than baseless speculation, but he was certain deep down that he would never truly know what Amy felt unless he met her again. Rowan thought to himself that understanding people's feelings seemed harder than studying. One of the female students noticed Rowan's emotionally engaging reading and kept staring at him silently. The students clapped enthusiastically for Rowan after he finished reading. Teacher Daphne looked very surprised by Rowan's impressive performance. Daphne considered Rowan's joining them to be something truly remarkable. After class ended, the students gathered around Rowan with excitement. They highly praised Rowan's reading and said they had never seen Teacher Daphne compliment anyone like that before. Suddenly, Rowan noticed something that slightly surprised him. He saw the girl who had been staring at him earlier and wondered to himself about her strange look. Rowan was shocked when he realized that this girl, was the same one he had seen in the vision shown to him by the tree earlier. The girl approached Rowan and introduced herself as Sophie Buffel, class representative and president. Rowan politely shook her hand and said he was pleased to meet her. Sophie asked him about the next elective lesson he had signed up for. Rowan simply replied that he had chosen basic swordsmanship. Sophie was surprised by his small dagger and asked if he intended to join the union as well. Rowan replied hesitantly that he had selected all the elective subjects and asked her if swordsmanship was necessary to join the union, since he didn't feel it suited him. Sophie stared at him in confusion without answering. Rowan wondered if he had said something wrong. The students then headed to the training hall. The swordsmanship instructor stood waiting for them and said loudly that whoever steps forward first gets the first opportunity. Rowan and the students showed clear enthusiasm, ready to begin training. The students began running excitedly across the training field, shouting with amazement. Rowan noticed something surprising that strongly caught his attention. One of the students called out to him, saying they would beat him at this rate, and urged him not to fall behind. Rowan stood hesitantly in place for a moment. He noticed in amazement that everyone was using mana to run, not just him. Rowan launched forward with tremendous force, using the mana inside him. The students were stunned by this sudden speed and began wondering who this new student was. One of them exclaimed in disbelief, "He's so fast!" Sophie realized in shock that this new student was Rowan himself. She thought to herself in astonishment that his speed was impossible. He had easily surpassed everyone. Rowan continued running at high speed, laughing with joy. He waved happily to the students and greeted them all. Then he laughed and challenged them to catch up with him, feeling even happier with mana all around him. One of the students shouted to warn the others to be careful while running. The teacher was greatly surprised by Rowan's unexpected performance. The instructor began wondering to himself if this was indeed the new student, because he possessed unusual energy. The teacher suspected that Rowan might have already trained in mana cultivation before. He decided that he would need to keep a close eye on Rowan. The teacher encouraged the students to keep running without stopping to see who could endure to the end. The students responded with enthusiasm. The students lined up in formation on the field after the run ended. Rowan curiously wondered if running with mana was a daily activity at the school. Sophie looked at Rowan in awe and wondered silently if he was even human. She was astonished that Rowan had lapped them all once, even though they had done their best. She also noticed that Rowan didn't seem tired at all. Rowan smiled at Sophie and said it was so much fun. She replied hesitantly that she agreed, though she secretly thought he might be a ghost. The instructor approached Rowan and said he hoped he had rested well. He introduced himself. "I'm Diego Sanchez, and I'll be training you in basic swordsmanship," and expressed his excitement to teach Rowan, who politely said he looked forward to his guidance. The instructor formally announced the start of the lesson and asked everyone to take a wooden sword. Some students began to complain and asked for more rest, but the instructor ordered them to stop whining. Diego noticed that Rowan hadn't picked up a sword yet and asked him, "Why haven't you taken a sword?" Rowan seemed a bit hesitant. Rowan recalled the image of Blake attacking him with a cruel smile and a sword during their previous fight. Rowan felt unwilling to hold the wooden sword as he remembered that moment. Master Diego noticed Rowan and asked him if he was afraid of swords. Then he approached Rowan, placed his hand on his shoulder, and told him that the sword is indeed a dangerous tool, and that's why it should be handled seriously. Diego continued, saying that the sword is just a tool, and the real issue lies in the intent of the person using it. He then added, advising Rowan to face the sword once, so he could understand his own intentions. Rowan began to ponder Diego's words, that the sword is nothing but a tool. He thought to himself that if Blake had used a stick instead of a sword, maybe he would have hated the stick instead of the sword. The students moved toward the training field in preparation for dueling, but Rowan still felt unwilling to become a true duelist. Nevertheless, Rowan decided not to run away from facing the matter and began to move the wooden sword in his hand. Diego watched Rowan closely and thought to himself that Rowan had enough potential to become an excellent duelist, but sadly his will was weak. He then announced the beginning of the dueling practice among the students and asked them to fight in pairs. Diego chose Rowan and Sophie to be the first pair to duel since they arrived first, which surprised them both. Rowan and Sophie exchanged surprised glances at the teacher's choice. Rowan quietly prepared to face Sophie in the training arena. The other students began talking among themselves, saying that Rowan might win in running, but dueling could be very difficult for him against Sophie from the well-known dueling family, the Buffles. Master Diego ordered the pair to begin the duel when they were ready. Sophie launched quickly in her first attack toward Rowan. Rowan was surprised by the intensity in Sophie's eyes and her determination during the attack. He noticed Sophie's steadiness and strength in the duel and thought to himself that he had never clearly seen such skills before. But strangely, he didn't feel the same bad feeling he used to have about the sword. He felt he wanted to learn from this experience and benefit from it. Diego and Sophie were surprised by Rowan's stance, as it was perfectly balanced in both defense and offense. Sophie thought to herself that Rowan's stance was unexpectedly solid. Then she began to feel nervous and wondered how she could not lose in the duel after already losing the running race. She gripped her sword tightly, telling herself that this was about her pride and the pride of the Buffle family. But she was surprised by Rowan's rapid charge and a decisive attack toward her. Sophie was deeply shocked when she realized that Rowan had also dodged her strike. She looked at Rowan in surprise, wondering how he had managed to evade her sword. At the same time, Rowan was closely observing and analyzing her movements with intense focus. Rowan lunged toward Sophie's chest with great speed and precision during the training. He followed up with strikes aimed at her shoulder and head, which greatly surprised Sophie. Sophie stared tensely into Rowan's eyes, who was watching her with calm confidence. She hesitated, realizing that Rowan's skill far exceeded her expectations. She tried to retreat and regain her balance, but Rowan continued to pressure her relentlessly. Rowan gripped his sword more tightly, preparing to launch a new attack. He leapt high into the air, delivering a decisive blow from above toward Sophie. But suddenly, Master Diego shouted to stop the duel. Signs of exhaustion were clear on Sophie's face as she paused, panting heavily. The surprise was that Rowan had already stopped his sword before the master even gave the command. Sophie felt confused and thought to herself that Rowan had been able to anticipate her every move. She wondered internally how Rowan could see and predict her movements so accurately. Sophie calmly admitted defeat to Rowan, but asked if they could spar again sometime. Rowan kindly agreed, smiling at her. After the training, Sophie told Rowan that his performance was excellent and that he had great talent in swordsmanship. Rowan humbly replied that the first 2 rounds were just luck, while he clearly lost the last 2. Sophie thanked Rowan and told him with a friendly smile that they could try again later. The students sat together and chatted, and one of them expressed joy that the next lesson was basic magic, almost like a long break. Rowan asked in surprise why the students considered the magic lesson a break and questioned whether they should be working hard to become members of the union. The other students were surprised by Rowan's words and stared at him in confusion. One student explained to Rowan that while the teacher is amazing, learning magic itself is extremely difficult, no matter how good the instruction is. The student wondered aloud if Rowan truly understood how hard it is to learn magic. Rowan was taken aback and didn't know what to say, because he had no idea how hard learning magic really was. One of the students began to explain to Rowan that the one who teaches basic magic is the former commander of the Honor Corps, who is now the Dean of Magic in the Union, Professor Arthur. Then they all headed to the large lecture hall where the magic class would be held. The wide hall's doors opened, ready to welcome the students. Professor Arthur entered the hall with great presence as the students sat quietly and in order. Sophie whispered to Rowan, telling him that this was the Professor Arthur she had mentioned before. Rowan looked at Professor Arthur and remembered what the students had said about him, that he used to be the commander of the Honor Corps and was now the Dean of Magic. Rowan felt deeply amazed as he noticed the dense mana surrounding Professor Arthur, and he wondered to himself how powerful the strongest person in the Union must be. Professor Arthur asked about the new student, and then Rowan introduced himself to Professor Arthur, saying he joined the lessons today. The professor introduced himself, saying he was Arthur and that he teaches magic. He calmly remarked that some of the students present might be feeling bored because they're attending the class merely as observers. Rowan responded confidently that he wanted to become a magician and join the union. Arthur laughed, impressed by Rowan's exceptional spirit. Then he warned him that the path to learning magic is much longer than the path of swordsmanship. Rowan remembered what his classmates had said when they were surprised to learn that he wanted to study magic instead of sword fighting. Rowan asked Arthur why the path of learning magic was so long, but Arthur asked Sophie to answer the question. Sophie explained that magic requires a vast amount of knowledge, puts a heavy burden on both mind and body, and even with great talent, a magician needs at least 10 years to become a first-level magician. Arthur confirmed Sophie's explanation, emphasizing that joining the union directly after graduation through magic is extremely difficult. Rowan reflected on that and thought to himself that a first-level magician couldn't become a full member right away, but only a temporary one. Arthur clarified that one must reach at least the 2nd level to become an actual member. Rowan thought to himself that he needed to reach the 3rd level of magic before graduation to be safe. Arthur asked Rowan if he knew what the 3rd level of magic meant, and Rowan honestly replied that he didn't know much about magic. Arthur smiled and said he would explain everything in the current lesson. Arthur began explaining why the union primarily focuses on sword fighters and why magic is considered an elite discipline that seeks wisdom and knowledge. Arthur wrote the spell Fire Arrow on the board and asked the students if anyone could spot the mistake in it. Rowan noticed that the spell looked very similar to the one he had seen earlier in the orphanage near the pit and the tree. Arthur told the students that it was normal not to spot the mistake easily, because although Fire Arrow may seem complicated to them, it is one of the foundational magical spells, and advanced magic is even more complex. Arthur demonstrated the spell in practice, creating a large fire arrow that shot through the hall. Rowan stared in utter amazement at what he saw. He noticed that the spell seemed slightly unstable, as if it was about to melt or fall apart. Arthur explained that this happened due to a small error in the spell, which made the magic very sensitive. Arthur began rewriting the spell precisely and correcting it on the board. Then he cast the spell again, this time with better control and more stability in front of the students. The students were greatly impressed by what Arthur had done. Arthur continued explaining that a magician must reinterpret the entire spell in order to fix even the smallest mistake, and that ordinary patience and understanding are never enough. In conclusion, Arthur clarified that to transform Fire Arrow into a fireball, a magician would need significantly greater magical power. Arthur explained to the students that using powerful magic consumes a large amount of energy and puts immense pressure on the mind and body. He then asked the students if they knew why magic reaches its limits faster than swordsmanship. Sophie enthusiastically answered that when using the same amount of mana, converting mana into aura through a weapon is more efficient than using magic. Arthur added that magic consumes a lot of magical power and puts intense strain on the body, and that the strength of magic is directly proportional to the magical power the magician possesses. Rowan then realized the nature of magical power, and that a magician's ability is directly proportional to their magical energy. He also realized that his ability to use powerful magic was limited due to his low amount of mana. Rowan thought that if he studied how magic works and how phenomena are formed, he might be able to use powerful spells despite his limitations. Arthur then asked Rowan what he thought was necessary to cast a spell like Fireball. Rowan hesitantly answered that it required the spell written on the board. Arthur confirmed Rowan's answer, but explained that it's impractical to use a long spell every time, which is why spells are drawn in special forms, most commonly as magical circles. Rowan wondered to himself if those magical circles were similar to the engravings on Headmaster Lazarus's body, and asked Arthur if some magicians engrave spells on their bodies. Arthur paused for a moment at Rowan's unexpected question. Then Arthur explained that magical circles are like symbols. If spells are equations, then circles are symbols that make them easier to use. Rowan wondered whether spoken spells were actually transformations of the language of spells. Arthur asked him why he thought that. Rowan calmly answered that the spell on the board looked like a design for casting fireball. So if the magical circles are symbols, then the spoken language they use to cast magic must be a language too. Arthur was astonished by Rowan's answer because he was thinking about concepts that only advanced magicians usually consider, despite his young age. Arthur praised Rowan for his excellent answer and explained that the precise arrangement of exact words is the core of spells. Arthur said that there is great power in speaking a single word using mana, which is called the true name, or the command word. Arthur demonstrated to the students the power of a command word by casting a very powerful fire spell. He explained that a spell doesn't rely solely on choosing the right words, but also on factors like tone, speed, and emotional state. Rowan remembered his previous readings and thought that he had never delivered a truly impactful reading easily before. At the end of the lesson, Arthur asked Rowan if he was still determined to study magic despite all the difficulties, and Rowan enthusiastically replied that his interest had only grown stronger. Arthur then told the students that in the next lesson, they would begin studying the ancient language and asked them to think carefully about its properties. At the end of the school day, the quiet hallway was lit by lamps as evening settled in. Sophie complained to Rowan about the endless homework and blamed herself for signing up for so many classes. She was surprised by Rowan, who had chosen an extremely packed schedule every day, with only lunch as his single break. But Rowan replied that studying was more enjoyable for him. Sophie jokingly responded that he was a little annoying, and then asked him where his room was. Rowan pointed it out, saying it was the second one at the end of the first floor. After Rowan pointed it out, Sophie told him that his roommate was Lucas, which made Rowan wonder who Lucas was. Sophie said goodbye to Rowan, telling him she was heading off now, and Rowan replied by wishing her a good night. At night, Rowan sat in his room studying and writing with intense focus. He thought deeply about the magical texts he was analyzing and realized that he could create his own spells. Rowan wondered if he could craft magic that was uniquely suited to him. Indeed, Rowan managed to successfully create a small magical spell and happily told himself that he had done it. As he tried to reshape the spell again, he reflected on how effective his new method had been. He realized that deconstructing and reconstructing the spell would make it more powerful and efficient. Suddenly, Rowan lost control of the spell and collapsed unconscious in his room. Later that night, someone entered the room. They wondered what had happened as they saw Rowan passed out from fatigue and exhaustion. Then a student with red hair appeared, questioning why Rowan was sleeping like that. And on the following day, in the large, quiet school building under a bright sky, Rowan heard a familiar voice that seemed to belong to Sienna, saying that what happened was exhausting for a young child, expressing her concern. Rowan was puzzled by the conversation, wondering if Sienna was talking about him, what administrative mistake she was referring to, and who she was speaking with. The voice continued, noting that there were clear potential signs that had motivated her to continue the training despite her doubts. Rowan suddenly woke up, wondering where he was. Lucas approached Rowan with concern, asking if he was awake and if he was okay. Rowan replied in confusion, still feeling drowsy. Lucas unexpectedly hugged Rowan, saying he had been very worried when he saw him unconscious. Lucas introduced himself as Lucas von Passau, his roommate and classmate. Lucas told Rowan that he was shocked to find him passed out after training and that he'd be in big trouble if his father found out. Lucas reassured Rowan that it was nothing serious and that he would feel better after some rest. Rowan wondered why Lucas was so concerned about him. Lucas told him that it was his father who had asked him to look after Rowan, which surprised Rowan. Lucas revealed that his father was Oscar, the deputy commander of the Faith Division in the Union. Rowan was astonished when he realized Lucas was Oscar's son. Lucas jokingly asked Rowan to tell his father that he had taken good care of him all night. Rowan thought that Lucas was right. His mana did seem incredibly pure, just like his father's. Lucas laughed and explained that, although the other students thought he was older, he was actually only 12 years old. Rowan asked Lucas if he had started school late, but Lucas replied that he had failed twice, due to lack of attendance. Lucas added that he preferred to stay away from studying as much as possible, and then asked Rowan what had caused him to faint, pointing to the mess in the room and signs of magical use. But Rowan could only remember seeing a fireball, and nothing else. Lucas expressed regret that they couldn't train together in swordsmanship if Rowan were interested in it. Rowan wondered if Lucas was also into swordsmanship. After all, his father was the deputy commander of the Faith Corps. Rowan noticed that Lucas had very strong mana and a much more powerful physique compared to the other students. He was tall and muscular. Rowan wondered to himself how much effort Lucas had put in to reach that level of strength. Rowan decided he had to try his best as well, even though he realized he was late for class, which made Lucas surprised that someone who had fainted wanted to go to school. Lucas jokingly advised him not to go while still dizzy from fainting and to just rest for now. But if Rowan was really determined to leave, Lucas playfully suggested they go out for some fresh air and eat something tasty instead of going to class. Rowan silently agreed, thinking that this might be the reason Lucas kept failing his studies. And in a final scene, the lively city square appeared under the bright sky, marking the beginning of a new day. Lucas urged Rowan to eat more, expressing concern that he might faint again. Suddenly, Rowan noticed a strong flow of mana coming from a nearby shop. Rowan asked Lucas to go to the place that had caught his attention, and Lucas told him that it was a magic shop. Lucas immediately agreed and suggested they go in together if Rowan was curious. They entered the magic shop, which had a calm and mysterious atmosphere. Both of them were amazed by the variety of magical items in the place. Rowan noticed that every item in the shop was saturated with a large amount of mana. While observing, Rowan suddenly remembered that he had no money. A look of disappointment appeared on his face, and he wished he had the money from his previous job at the orphanage. Lucas, puzzled, asked Rowan why he looked suddenly so down. Rowan told Lucas that he didn't have any money to buy anything. Lucas assured him that he could help him buy what he wanted since his father had asked him to take care of him, and that includes helping him too. Lucas's words clearly excited Rowan, and he eagerly asked if he could buy everything in the shop. Lucas showed the few coins he had in his hand. Lucas gently suggested that Rowan choose just one item, as he hadn't planned to spend much. Rowan began wandering around the shop, thinking to himself about what he should buy, while Lucas continued counting the coins with him. Rowan decided he needed to find something suitable that Lucas could afford for him. He approached a shelf full of various magical objects. He noticed a mysterious stone filled with turbulent mana, which caught his attention. Rowan picked up the stone and wondered why it was so cheap despite the strength of the mana inside it. The shopkeeper approached Rowan, telling him that he had picked the Gochia stone. The shopkeeper remarked that he had forgotten he had a similar stone at home as well. Rowan asked the shopkeeper about the uses of this stone, and he replied that it was just a decorative piece, and that the egg inside would never hatch. When Rowan asked what was inside the egg, the shopkeeper replied that he wasn't sure. The shopkeeper explained that the stone was sealed with unique magic, and that he had obtained it a long time ago, and it hadn't changed since. Rowan asked the shopkeeper if the item was considered a magical tool, and the shopkeeper confirmed that it was. Rowan asked again if breaking the seal would awaken something, and the shopkeeper said that theoretically yes, but practically, probably not. Rowan stared at the stone in his hand, thinking about the possibility that it might contain unique magic. He noticed the complexity of the magical circle drawn on the stone, and thought that the magic inside might be even stronger than the fireball spell. He turned to Lucas and asked him what he thought. Lucas decided to take the mysterious stone, saying it looked better than a book, and that he could use it to throw things or hit with it. The two of them left the shop after Lucas thanked the owner, who smiled and bid them farewell, inviting them to return again. As they walked, Lucas suggested to Rowan that they go somewhere else. Lucas noticed that it was already time, and Rowan asked where they were heading. Lucas excitedly pointed to a large, majestic building and said he was taking him to the most amazing place in the Union. Rowan was stunned by the beauty of the place, and Lucas proudly said that the view was breathtaking. Rowan asked if that building was the heart of the Union, and Lucas explained that the clock tower was indeed the heart of the Union, and the seat of the Guildmaster and the Supreme Commander. Rowan asked Lucas if he had ever seen the Supreme Commander in person. Lucas replied that he had seen the former commander when he was young, accompanying his father, and he was wearing a magnificent white suit. Lucas described the commander as being like an elegant swan among black crows, and Rowan silently wondered about that comparison. Rowan felt a mix of anxiety and curiosity, as he had only known about the ranks of power from books until now. He remembered that Union commanders of the 7th rank, like Oscar, are experts capable of protecting an entire city, and the one who leads such commanders possesses the strength to subdue an entire nation. The Supreme Commander of the Union is considered the most powerful being on the continent, and stands on equal footing with the king. Rowan thought that such leaders had become massive and distant figures in his eyes, but deep down he believed that one day he would reach that level. Later on, the two stood together under the night sky, gazing at the clock tower from afar. Rowan curiously wondered about the meaning of the red arrow pointing to a specific place on the clock. Then he asked Lucas how to read that clock. Lucas hesitated for a moment before explaining the method to Rowan. He then explained that the letters on the outer ring indicated the year in an ancient language, but he was surprised when Rowan asked if that meant they were in the year 262. Lucas confirmed that the current year in the kingdom was indeed 262, as shown on the clock. Rowan completed his deduction by saying that the other side of the clock must indicate the date and month, and today was the 14th of June. Lucas was amazed by Rowan's ability to read these complex symbols, and asked how he knew that. Rowan suddenly remembered that he had seen this clock in the vision shown to him by the tree earlier. Rowan realized with fear that the time indicated on the clock in his vision was 10 years from now, on the 14th of June. Rowan stood anxiously, thinking that this vision was about a future 10 years ahead, in the school building under the calm night sky. Lucas suggested that Rowan get some good rest after exhausting himself from overthinking. Lucas told Rowan that he was going to train, as he didn't want his body to become sluggish. Rowan sat alone in his room wishing Lucas well. He remembered the vision the tree had shown him and told himself he couldn't ignore it. He believed that what he saw wasn't just an illusion, but possibly a true prophetic dream. Rowan thought, while holding the stone he had bought, about how he could change the future. He decided to try and gather as much information as possible from the visions he had seen. Rowan recalled the clock tower that had appeared in his vision and said that if he arranged the events chronologically, he would be able to see the logical sequence of most events. Rowan began organizing the memories and visions in his mind in chronological order. The first scene he chose was the moment the fleeing person died. Rowan remembered that the ceiling collapse came right after that moment. He tried to organize the sequence of events and understand them more clearly, and as Rowan reviewed the vision the tree had shown him once again, he realized that these scenes might truly be from the future. He stopped at the image of the clock tower, realizing that it was indeed a scene from the future. Rowan stared deeply into the vision, trying to understand its meaning, but suddenly, images of his friends, Sophie, Lucas, and even teacher Sienna, lying on the ground appeared before him. Rowan felt intense anger and anxiety upon seeing these painful images. He firmly decided that he needed to find out what rank he had reached in the future, and among the many images, he noticed only one that showed his own face. He stared at it silently, trying to process what he was seeing. Rowan felt a sense of relief when he found the image he had been searching for. He noticed that he couldn't see the rank insignia clearly from this angle. Rowan decided to try adjusting the viewing angle to get a clearer look at the insignia. The vision actually began to shift as he tried to adjust the viewing angle. Rowan finally succeeded in changing the perspective and said to himself, "Good." He stood firmly, confident that he would now be able to see what he wanted clearly. Then he wondered in confusion and fear about this strange place. He seemed to be standing in a place that was burning. Rowan froze in shock in front of the person who appeared in his vision. He stared at the man's features in utter disbelief. A deep fear gripped him as he realized a horrifying truth. He would die in 10 years. In the vision, Rowan saw the entire city burning in front of the clock tower. He then suddenly woke up, disturbed and confused by the terrifying vision. Rowan sat silently on his bed, deeply anxious and lost in thought. He wondered if the vision was a warning sent by the tree. He remembered earlier words that said the fall of the Union would lead to the end of the kingdom and the entire continent. He also knew that the tree was the result of dark magic that extracted mana from humans, and that the people who had turned into water were trapped between life and death. Rowan realized that another person was present in the vision, and perhaps their will had intertwined with his, causing him to become involved as well. He then stood up hesitantly, saying that he couldn't be sure whether this vision would actually come true. He realized that if he wanted to change the future, he had to create a reality different from the one he saw. Rowan opened a book and decided to start the change with himself first. He told himself that he didn't know what rank he would reach in the future, and it didn't matter much to him. Rowan thought that maybe he would never become a union member at all, or maybe he would join the administrative office and wear the red suit, or perhaps he would wear the white suit someday. The next morning, Lucas called out to Rowan from outside the room. He told Rowan that teacher Daphne had asked for him to stop by the teacher's office first. Lucas said he didn't know the reason for the summons. Rowan reminded him that he too had just returned to school after a long absence, but Lucas said he hadn't heard anything from the teacher about himself, then walked off, saying he'd see him in class. Rowan wondered anxiously why teacher Daphne had summoned him. In the teacher's office, Daphne asked Rowan if he was feeling better, expressing concern about how pale he looked. Rowan replied that he was feeling much better and thanked her for her concern. Daphne told him not to push himself and explained that he could cancel any elective subject if he wanted. Rowan smiled gently, saying he was happy with all the subjects he had chosen and was looking forward to the ones he hadn't even started yet, which made Daphne feel a little guilty about the heavy schedule. He reassured her with a bright smile, assuring her that he was fine and would take good care of himself. Daphne kindly told him that he could come to her any time if he needed advice. Rowan left the teacher's office and headed to class. He told himself that he needed to take as many classes as possible, because for him, training was like breathing. He opened the classroom door, wondering what awaited him inside. The students warmly welcomed Rowan with great excitement as he entered the classroom. One of the girls approached Rowan and told him she had been very worried when she heard he had fainted, but he replied that he was fine now. Rowan thought to himself that if his friends grew stronger along with him, they might be able to survive in the future. The students expressed their happiness that they could now all study together from this point on. Rowan asked the students to help him with something. He began listing the names of some students who didn't attend the basic swordsmanship class. Then he continued by naming other students who didn't attend the basic magic class. One girl was surprised that Rowan had memorized the names of all the students in just one day. Another girl asked in confusion why he was suddenly so interested in these subjects. Rowan smiled kindly and said that he hoped the students who didn't attend these classes would join him in the lessons. The students got excited about Rowan's idea and expressed their willingness to try. One of them hesitated slightly, expressing concern specifically about the magic class. Rowan said he completely understood his hesitation, but suggested that they look at it from a different perspective. Then Rowan explained that it would be easier if he showed them himself what he meant. Rowan asked Lucas to try attending the magic class just for today. Lucas agreed hesitantly, because Rowan's gentle smile made it almost impossible to say no. Teacher Arthur appeared in the hall, silently observing the students. Arthur felt relieved when he realized that Rowan had encouraged the students to attend the magic class. Arthur gently asked Rowan if he was feeling better now, and Rowan replied that he was fine thanks to his concern. Arthur smiled and said that this was the first time the magic class had this much energy and enthusiasm, and it was all thanks to Rowan. Rowan explained that he wanted to show his friends that magic wasn't as distant from them as they thought. Arthur was surprised by this statement and wondered to himself how Rowan planned to prove that. Rowan asked Arthur for permission to step up on the platform to show them what he meant in practice. Arthur agreed to Rowan's request and gently warned him to be careful during the demonstration. As Rowan stepped onto the platform, Lucas wondered in confusion why Rowan never seemed to be afraid. Elsewhere in the school, Lazarus arrived alongside the head of academic affairs, Daphne. Daphne asked Lazarus if his early arrival at school was because of Rowan. He replied that he came for more than one reason, and that taking care of the school was part of the responsibilities of the administration office. They also noticed Sienna nearby, so Lazarus asked her if she was on a special assignment from Vice Commander Oscar. Sienna looked at them and calmly said there was something more important than her that needed their attention right now. Teacher Diego showed interest in the magic class for the first time due to the students' sudden excitement toward the subject. The headmistress noticed the presence of the head of the administration office and expressed concern about it. She asked everyone to remain quiet and observe the lesson without causing disruption. And when the door opened, the surprise began. Rowan started casting his spell, and a powerful light energy suddenly appeared from his hand. A massive fireball formed with great strength and clarity in front of everyone, leaving them in utter shock. Joy and amazement appeared on Rowan's face as he effortlessly controlled the enormous fireball. Rowan extended his hand, channeling immense magical energy that filled the entire room. Teacher Arthur was deeply shocked as he watched Rowan successfully cast the fireball spell. The magic Rowan used was far beyond the capability of someone his age. Arthur thought to himself that not only was this spell outside the curriculum, but even the less powerful fire arrow spell is difficult for fifth-year students to execute. He added that this kind of magic is only accessible to exceptionally gifted children, not any regular student. Arthur was greatly astonished, wondering how a young child like Rowan could accomplish such a feat. He watched in awe as Rowan stood firmly before the fireball. The head of the administration office said he had never seen a fireball with such purity of energy, calling it something akin to ancient celestial magic. Diego pointed out that the fireball's density was incredibly stable, and Lazarus added that it was not just stable, but beyond natural expectations. He emphasized that it is usually impossible to use such magic at Rowan's age, even though it technically falls under the category of simple magic. He added that fixing a fireball in one place and controlling its heat and size is truly astonishing. He also said that what Rowan was using wasn't just an ordinary fireball, it was a different type of magic. Sienna added that she had sensed something unique about his mana from the very first time she saw him. The teachers all wondered how Rowan could possess such immense power, despite growing up in an orphanage. Sienna felt anxious as she watched Rowan continue to use such powerful magic. She asked the headmistress if it was okay for Rowan to exert himself like this after previously fainting. The headmistress replied cautiously that she wasn't authorized to intervene directly, but she believed the teachers should prevent him from exhausting himself. Rowan continued focusing hard on the magic, despite the clear strain on his face. He realized that what mattered most was maintaining steady mana flow, not just the size of the fireball. Rowan added that the fireball must not waver due to a loss of mana control. Suddenly, Rowan became aware of something else as he continued using the magic. He noticed that the barrier created by Teacher Arthur was incredibly impressive. Rowan thought the barrier resembled the pit he had seen at the orphanage, though different in nature and purpose. He wondered what would happen if the fireball collided with that barrier. Finally, Rowan asked Teacher Arthur about the name of the spell he used to create the barrier, expressing his deep admiration. Teacher Arthur was astonished by Rowan's ability to maintain focus while asking questions, despite the difficulty of controlling magic. Arthur began activating his own spell, Blue Flame Barrier, in response to Rowan's question. He released the barrier, which began absorbing and containing the massive fireball Rowan had created. Rowan was surprised to see the fireball being absorbed into the barrier without any explosion or damage. The fireball peacefully dissipated into the air after being fully contained within Arthur's barrier. The students' faces were filled with awe and disbelief as they watched what had just happened. Arthur thought to himself in confusion that he couldn't decide whether to scold Rowan for his boldness or praise him for his creativity. Lazarus, the head of the administration office, walked up to Rowan clapping and said he had done well. Lazarus explained to everyone that the magic the students had witnessed was Teacher Arthur's signature spell, known as the Blue Flame Barrier. Rowan expressed his admiration for the name, and Arthur jokingly told him that the name wasn't important and that he didn't choose it himself. Rowan replied that it had been given a great name as a gift. Arthur then asked Rowan whether the spell he used had a name. Rowan replied in confusion that it was just a fireball, but Arthur told him that everyone could clearly see that what he used wasn't just an ordinary fireball. Arthur affirmed that Rowan himself surely knew that the spell far exceeded a typical fireball. Rowan gently agreed, saying he hadn't really thought much about it before. He added that he would seriously consider giving his spell a proper name, which made Arthur feel slightly awkward since he had intended to warn Rowan about the danger. Lazarus stepped forward and seriously told Rowan that, as the head of the administration office, he needed to ask him a question. He asked clearly why Rowan had done something so dangerous and what his intentions were. Rowan answered confidently that he trusted his ability to control the magic and expected that Teacher Arthur would be watching closely and would protect everyone. Arthur asked whether the sole purpose of Rowan's action was to show off the fireball, and Rowan hesitantly admitted that it was indeed his intention. Rowan added with a sincere smile that he wanted to give his friends confidence and encourage them. He said he believed some students might be interested in magic, but were too afraid to try it. He continued that he wanted to show his classmates that learning magic is possible and not something unreachable, even before graduation. Arthur thought to himself that Rowan's ability stemmed from his exceptional talent, but he didn't say it out loud. Arthur felt embarrassed when he realized he might have been the one limiting the student's potential with his preconceived ideas. He said to himself that it was strange that such a young child like Rowan had made him realize this truth. Rowan asked Arthur if he could stay a bit longer on the platform because he still wanted to show his friends something else, and Arthur calmly agreed. Rowan asked Lucas to come up on the platform, and Lucas was surprised, asking in confusion if Rowan really meant him. Lucas stepped up, wondering why he had been chosen in particular. Rowan smiled and said he was going to help Lucas try casting magic himself, which surprised Lucas. Rowan confidently explained that magic and swordsmanship are very similar in how they handle mana, and since Lucas trained every day, he should definitely be able to cast magic. Lucas wondered to himself how he could possibly use magic without proper training. Rowan suggested that Lucas try using verbal magic, since it's easier than using circles and magical formulas. Rowan asked Lucas to repeat the ancient incantation after him. Lucas hesitated while trying to pronounce the old words and stumbled over them, but Rowan helped him along. Rowan was surprised and wondered if this was the first time Lucas had heard the language, even though it was his third year in the first grade. Lucas felt embarrassed and admitted that he didn't understand the meaning of the words he was repeating. Rowan began explaining the meaning of the incantation in detail, which made Lucas even more embarrassed. The students started watching Rowan in amazement as he loudly recited the meaning of the spell. Sophie observed the situation with worry and tension. Rowan wondered to himself why Lucas couldn't master such a simple spell. He became even more worried about the fact that the other students didn't seem to understand either, and he wondered what he should do now. Rowan realized that if the students remained stuck at the beginning, it would be a big problem, especially if they weren't prepared for what would happen in 10 years. This spell was supposed to be easy for everyone, including Lucas, but now, not even Sophie seemed to understand it. Arthur gently asked Rowan to be patient with Lucas, since it was his very first magic lesson. Arthur then asked Rowan to teach Lucas the magical formula instead of the verbal spell, as it might be easier for him to understand. Rowan began writing the magical formula on the board using mental magic. Arthur and the other teachers were impressed by Rowan's ability to use mental magic so easily. Rowan finished writing the formula on the board and signaled that he was done. He activated the written magical formula in a truly impressive way. Everyone was astonished by the strength and clarity of the magic Rowan had performed. Lazarus asked Rowan where he had gotten the formula, and Rowan replied that he hadn't copied it from anywhere. He had simply developed what Arthur had written in his own way. Arthur explained that the formula was entirely different, and not just a simple modification. Rowan replied that he was only trying to simplify it for himself. Arthur confirmed to Rowan that he had, in fact, created an entirely new magical formula. Lazarus suggested to the head of academic affairs, Daphne, that they postpone discussing the new formula until a separate meeting, since the lesson had already gone on too long. Teacher Daphne agreed to the proposal. Teacher Lazarus thanked Rowan for presenting the new formula and told him they would speak again soon. Arthur then turned towards Sienna, who was present, and asked for her name. She responded that she was Sienna from the Faith Corps. Arthur asked Sienna to take over the remaining lessons in his place, which clearly surprised her. The teacher explained to Sienna that she could either teach them swordsmanship or let them self-study. Teacher Diego also asked Sienna to take care of his next class, which made her visibly uncomfortable. Finally, Arthur began preparing to use magic once again. The magical energy, glowing blue, spread throughout the entire room and filled the hall. Teacher Arthur left with Lazarus, the head of the administration office, leaving Sienna in charge of the lessons. Sienna stood where the teacher had been, looking slightly confused as she tried to organize the students. She felt a bit nervous, wondering how to handle this sudden situation. Sienna clapped her hands loudly to get the students' attention. She introduced herself to the students and explained that she was from the Faith Guard division and would be managing the classes temporarily. Sienna firmly emphasized the need for everyone to treat the class normally and participate without exception. Inside, Sienna felt the pressure and wondered what she could do in this situation. Elsewhere, the emergency committee had convened to discuss an urgent matter. Some attendees questioned why the committee had been summoned after so many years of inactivity. Lazarus, the head of the administration office, opened the meeting by stating that today's agenda concerned education policy at the Union Academy. Lazarus decided to begin by discussing Rowan, whose actions had triggered the committee's call. Teacher Arthur confirmed that Rowan had performed the well-known fireball spell, but had used it in a completely different way. Arthur explained that the power of Rowan's fireball was extraordinary and approached the level of unique magic, and that his creation of a new magical formula was unprecedented. One of the teachers asked if such a thing was truly possible, and Arthur responded confidently that it was confirmed and documented. Lazarus pointed out that the matter must be studied and analyzed further, and that Rowan's formula should, for now, be considered a new concept. Another teacher agreed that Rowan was an unprecedented genius, but reminded everyone that he was still a first-year student and needed age-appropriate education. A discussion broke out among the attendees about the necessity of providing specialized education for prodigies, and whether that conflicted with the philosophy of general education. Others expressed concern about losing talents if they weren't properly supported. One member strongly opposed the idea of early admission into the union, stressing that the union values more than just skill. Another asked whether there were other points they needed to know, stressing the importance of providing Rowan with suitable hands-on training. Someone raised a concern about a potential issue regarding Rowan's personality. One of the members said that Rowan was known as a polite child, and Arthur added that he was indeed kind, but he seemed to need more awareness of his friend's feelings. Arthur smiled, thinking that the union is entirely built on merit, and it's only natural that Rowan would stand out because of his unique talent. There was noticeable concern about the issue of admission itself, as it might cause social problems among the students. One member clarified that the final obstacle in the entrance exam is the personal interview, which focuses heavily on the applicant's character. Another pointed out that Rowan's intentions in encouraging his peers were good, but they might also lead to social isolation. The discussion continued regarding the large gap in ability between Rowan and his classmates, and some questioned whether it was fair to analyze the personality of a 10-year-old child. Lazarus concluded the meeting by proposing that Rowan undergo a personal interview. The committee decided to summon Rowan so they could hear the story directly from him. Rowan entered the room with visible sadness on his face. The head of the committee, Daphne, welcomed him and asked why he looked so down. She asked if his disappointment was because Lucas had been unable to show any magic earlier. Rowan replied sadly that he was disappointed in himself for not being able to properly assess his friend's abilities. Teacher Arthur reassured him, saying he shouldn't feel guilty. Magic is indeed a difficult task. Rowan began thinking that his friends had seen the magic class as a break, and maybe Lucas, too, gave up easily on things that didn't interest him. He added that perhaps he had pressured Lucas without considering his personal circumstances. Then Rowan said with concern that there was another possibility, that Lucas, or one of his friends, might be sick or exhausted without him knowing. Teacher Arthur reassured him that there was no need to worry about that. Rowan felt happy and relieved once he was sure that his friends were not sick. Lazarus asked him why he was so determined to teach his friends magic. Rowan calmly explained that it didn't necessarily have to be through magic. He added that he just wanted to grow stronger alongside his friends and have all of them join the union together. The committee members looked at Rowan with understanding and appreciation. The head of the committee told Rowan that the purpose of this meeting wasn't to scold him and asked him to go rest. Rowan left the room after the interview ended. The chairwoman began documenting new decisions regarding the educational direction for first-year students, prioritizing balance. She emphasized the importance of balancing gifted children's education with the development of social skills and empathy among regular students. One member announced that the Union Academy would be undergoing a new transformation focused primarily on first-year students. Another member proposed beginning an analysis of the current curriculum to apply this new direction. The next day, students gathered in the courtyard to hear the new instructions. The teacher announced to the students that both swordsmanship and magic studies would now be mandatory subjects starting today. Lucas and Rowan were surprised that school policy had changed in just one day. The teacher added that active union members would now participate as assistant instructors. The students grew excited upon hearing that they would have the valuable opportunity to learn from real union members. Rowan, Sophie, and Lucas were selected to carry out an independent training session among themselves and were instructed to prepare for a duel. Lucas smiled eagerly at the challenge, saying he'd wanted to face Rowan for a long time. Sophie confidently declared her determination to show the results of her training so far. Lucas jokingly asked Sophie if she held a grudge against Rowan, but she denied it. Then Lucas asked to face Rowan first, while Sophie confirmed she would go next. The battle between the three students began with intensity and excitement in the center of the courtyard. Sophie stood catching her breath, thinking that Rowan had managed to read the path of her sword again. Sophie felt hopeful, and told herself that if she trained just a bit more, she might be able to win next time. Rowan shook Sophie's hand with a smile and told her it was a good match, and Sophie responded in kind. Sophie wondered sadly if there was something wrong with her dueling style, as she had been confident she would win this time. Rowan answered clearly that her mana flow seemed a bit unsteady, and advised her to change the direction of her mana flow. Lucas cut in mockingly, saying Sophie should stop waving her sword randomly and strike with precision and purpose. Sophie was annoyed by Lucas's words and yelled at him angrily when he said the real reason was that her legs were too weak and shaky. Rowan tried to ease the tension by saying Lucas had a bit of a point, but Sophie snapped at Lucas, telling him to be quiet. Sophie asked Rowan what exactly she should do, and Rowan assured her that the issue wasn't her strength. She had plenty of it. Rowan explained clearly that Sophie was distributing her mana equally between the upper and lower parts of her body, and she needed to increase the mana in her lower body to improve her balance. Lucas joked to Sophie that this is what he meant when he said she was swinging too hard, which is why her feet kept stumbling. Sophie yelled at him again, furious. Watching the scene unfold, teacher Diego smiled and happily said that their concerns about student relationships now seemed unnecessary. Chairwoman Daphne met with Rowan and asked how things were going at school. He replied that he was happy and enjoying the lessons. She gently asked if he had managed to let go of the burdens he had been carrying in his heart. Rowan calmly confirmed that he had, and said he had learned that every friend has their strengths and weaknesses, and that it was he who didn't understand that well at first. The chairwoman expressed her happiness at Rowan's realization, emphasizing that in the end, everyone is different. She asked him about his relationships with his friends, and Rowan smiled and said that all of them were kind and cared about him a lot. Rowan hesitated a little before admitting that some of his female classmates asked him for things he sometimes didn't understand. The chairwoman was slightly surprised and asked what kind of things they asked for. Rowan explained that some girls asked him to go shopping or to look at flowers, things that had nothing to do with studying. The chairwoman laughed gently, saying it was a phase when they start to show interest in the opposite gender. Then she asked him what he did in those situations. Rowan answered innocently that he usually suggested they study instead, which made the chairwoman laugh as she thought to herself that he was very strict about such matters. She jokingly asked him if there was one girl he was particularly interested in. Rowan spoke about Sophie and said she was a little different from the others, very talented in swordsmanship and able to use fire, which made her special. The chairwoman, feeling curious, asked if he was close to Sophie, and Rowan replied that he was moved by her story and circumstances. Rowan explained that Sophie was an illegitimate child from a family famous for swordsmanship, and her father had sent her to the Union to develop her skills. He added that she was under a lot of pressure, and that he considered her a friend he could learn a lot from. The chairwoman then asked about Lucas, and Rowan said he was also a wonderful and talented friend, especially in physical strength. Finally, Rowan said that recently he had been working on a personal theory related to Lucas. Rowan thought that Lucas's brain might be full of muscles and training, which made studying difficult for him. Rowan explained with a smile that he couldn't let Lucas fail again, so he was trying to guide him as a friend, because that's what good people do. The chairwoman felt that Rowan had a special personality and unique way of thinking, which made her smile awkwardly. Elsewhere in the Union School, Arthur quietly told Rowan that he couldn't afford to pity his situation. He added that because of Rowan's exceptional abilities, he had already obtained 10 out of the 11 abilities. Rowan replied sadly, saying he wanted to use stronger magic than what he could currently use. He asked if there was any way to improve his physical constitution, and Arthur answered that he could use special magical tools to enhance his strength. Rowan showed excitement about the idea, but Arthur explained that if it were that easy, everyone would become a magician. Rowan felt disappointed when he learned that most magical tools available for sale were either temporary or weak in effect. He then asked about what kind of elixir might suit him. Teacher Arthur explained that there are different types of elixirs. Some restore magical energy, others enhance physical strength. He added that there are very rare kinds of elixirs that significantly boost magical power. Rowan quietly thought that these elixirs were similar to the luteal fruit that the Ratil members had tried to obtain, leading them to consume children. Arthur then told him that there was no guarantee an elixir would be perfectly compatible with him. But he asked Rowan not to be discouraged, and to keep his spirits up, and not to wear that sad face. Arthur then removed his necklace, and said it contained one of the elixirs he possessed. He added that he had received it from the former governor as a reward for his efforts. He handed it to Rowan, saying that perhaps this necklace was meant for him all along. Rowan hesitantly asked if it was really okay to accept something so valuable. Arthur assured him that the elixir wasn't as powerful as Rowan thought, so Rowan accepted it with gratitude. Rowan took the elixir and swallowed it immediately. Suddenly, Rowan felt a strange energy surrounding him. He raised his hand in astonishment, trying to understand what was happening. Soon he returned to consciousness in the room again. Rowan said sadly that the elixir hadn't worked the way he had hoped. A look of clear disappointment appeared on his face. Arthur said with sadness that he had expected the result to be at least a little better. Rowan thought sadly that this was exactly what he had expected too. He decided that instead of looking for ways to improve his body, it would be better to reconsider what he could already do. He concluded that manipulating mana flow by breaking down and reconstructing complex spells might be the best way for him to use magic. Rowan thanked teacher Arthur with a gentle smile and said he still had a lot to study. Half a year later, winter arrived, and the school buildings were covered in snow. Inside the first-year classroom, the students began their final exam in magical studies. Rowan stood in the center of the room, performing a test in front of a panel of teachers. The teachers watched cautiously as Rowan executed a powerful fire spell with precision. Rowan demonstrated astonishing control over fire, creating multiple fireballs at the same time. The teachers expressed their amazement at Rowan's unique talent and his ability to combine different types of magic. Rowan cautiously asked whether his magic would be accepted in the Union, considering its low destructive power. One of the teachers reassured him, saying that performing magic without a chant already proved he was at the level of a 4th-rank mage. The teacher advised Rowan to focus on his strengths and continue developing his current abilities without worrying about destructive power, and Rowan asked what he should study next. The teacher added that Rowan could continue deconstructing and reconstructing 4th-rank spells as he understood them, and promised to grant him access to the ancient texts in the office archives. Lazarus suggested that Rowan keep his unique abilities secret, and Arthur asked if he was ready to make a vow about it. The two teachers agreed to make a magical vow between themselves to protect the secrecy of Rowan's abilities. They performed a magical oath in front of Rowan. Rowan wondered to himself, puzzled, why they were doing this in the middle of his exam. A full year passed after these events. Senior teachers and school officials gathered in response to an emergency summons. The head of the meeting began by saying that although the matter technically fell under his authority, he wanted to include everyone due to its importance. Teacher Diego announced that the school would no longer teach Rowan any mana-based movement techniques, martial arts, or swordsmanship from now on. One attendee asked in surprise what the reason for this sudden decision was. Diego explained that Rowan, now a 3rd-year student, wished to join the Union, and it would be better for him to learn the fundamentals directly there. Arthur asked if he meant that Rowan's entire focus was now on learning magic. He added that Rowan's talent deserved recognition. Diego expressed his appreciation for Rowan's talent, but affirmed that he would support the decision by focusing solely on physical training. Sienna raised her hand to ask about Rowan's current level. Diego replied that Rowan could pass the first stage of the Union entrance exam simply by drawing his sword. Lazarus asked if he was truly that skilled. Diego confirmed that Rowan's talent was natural, and that his destructive power would improve gradually over time. Teacher Daphne asked with clear concern about Rowan's level as a mage. A brief silence fell over the room as everyone recognized the weight of the question. Head teacher Arthur declared clearly that he had nothing more he could teach Rowan. He added that Rowan could easily use 1st and 2nd rank spells, and was currently working on deconstructing 3rd rank spells, making him the equivalent of a 4th rank mage. The head teacher concluded by saying that Rowan was a brilliant boy who treated complex spells as if they were mere toys. Someone pointed out that Rowan was still just a 3rd-year student. A group of girls walked through the hallway, surprised to see Rowan, whispering his name with great respect. Teacher Arthur announced the end of the class and asked Rowan to stay behind for a moment. Rowan was surprised by Arthur's request but said he was ready to listen. Arthur began speaking to Rowan calmly, once they were alone in the room. He informed him that a magical academic exchange event with the region of Shuiren would be held soon. Rowan was surprised when Arthur told him he would be required to participate in it. He asked in confusion why this event was being held so suddenly. Arthur replied that such exchanges were once common for sharing opinions. Arthur explained that the exchanges gradually ceased as the prestige of magic declined. Rowan then asked why it was returning now. Arthur told Rowan clearly that the real reason for the event's revival was Rowan himself. Rowan asked in shock why that would be the case. And Arthur explained that Rowan's reputation for exceptional magic had reached Schwerin. Arthur said that Schwerin is the only region among the 7 nations that has a dedicated magic tower and focuses primarily on magic. He added that the tower is tied to Schwerin's leadership, and all magical information flows through them. Rowan asked Arthur if he was also from Schwerin, and Arthur replied that he had received his advanced training up to the 3rd level there before joining the Union. This prompted Rowan to ask why Schwerin was organizing the event. From Arthur's perspective, Arthur explained that their interest in Rowan was likely driven by curiosity at first. Arthur continued, saying that Schwerin had probably learned that a 4th-rank magician was studying at the Union School. Rowan felt embarrassed and clarified that he wasn't truly a 4th-rank mage yet, but Arthur told him that magic wasn't only about raw power. Arthur told Rowan that the main purpose of the event was to confirm an unprecedented talent, and that Schwerin wanted Rowan to represent them at the exchange. Rowan asked nervously what would happen if he refused to go. Arthur replied that refusing might actually be the better option, but added that once Rowan heard the terms, he'd find it difficult to decline. Rowan curiously asked about those terms. Arthur told him that Schwerin had offered an elixir in exchange for allowing the event to be held at the time and place of the Union's choosing. Rowan was shocked when he heard about the elixir, and thought of it as a legendary potion that could restore magical power and vitality, and sometimes even permanently increase physical abilities. He worried if they had discovered something about his unique body, but Arthur reassured him that was unlikely. Rowan asked if they would hand over the elixir directly, and Arthur explained that the event was a contest involving magical interpretation and discussion, and the winner would receive the elixir. Rowan was stunned when he realized the prize was an elixir just for winning a magical debate. He cautiously asked whether he would be the one to receive the elixir if he won. Rowan hesitated for a moment, unsure if winning would actually mean the elixir would be his personally. But Arthur reassured him with a smile, confirming that if Rowan represented them and won the competition, the elixir would truly belong to him. So Rowan gladly agreed. A few days later, the day of the magical academic exchange began. Both sides, the Union representatives and the Schwerin representatives, met face-to-face in the reception hall. Teacher Arthur welcomed everyone, saying he was happy to meet them all. Bert, a magician from Schwerin, stepped forward to greet Arthur politely, noting that it had been a long time since they last met. Rowan turned to look at Bert thoughtfully, while Arthur greeted him kindly. Rowan noticed that there was no one his age among the Schwerin delegation, and all of them had strong magical energy. Arthur asked if those young people were the participants, and Bert confirmed they were 3 students eager to benefit from his experience. Arthur realized that Schwerin was trying to show its strength by sending 3 students, even though the Union had only announced Rowan. He understood that Schwerin's mages wanted to demonstrate that they were still the strongest, and he decided this was a good opportunity to show the Union's strength. He smiled and said he would do his best for them. Arthur politely apologized for the low number of Union participants, explaining that only Rowan was currently worthy of participating. Bert respectfully replied that they expected a lot from Rowan, and that their students would make great progress if they learned from him. Rowan felt relieved and pleased upon hearing Bert's encouraging words, and he smiled kindly at the Schwerin mages. The students from Schwerin were surprised and concerned by the confident smile on Rowan's face. Arthur and Bert shook hands and agreed to rest and prepare for the meeting in the discussion hall that afternoon. Several hours later, everyone gathered in the discussion hall, ready to begin the event. Students from the Union nervously wondered if Rowan would face the Schwerin group alone. They shouted loudly for Rowan, urging him to defeat everyone in a single strike, which surprised Lucas. Lucas stepped up to explain to the others that this was a magical debate competition based on intellect, not a physical fight. Another girl added that arguments and debates are also battles, and that Rowan might be hurt by harsh words. Lucas was surprised when he realized the girl knew his name, and she responded that she knew him because he was always beside Rowan. The girl confidently told her classmates that Rowan would not be easily defeated, no matter what the others tried. Lucas commented with concern that he might need to step in to ease the younger students' tension. At that moment, Sophie noticed that the session was starting, which caught her attention. Teacher Daphne entered the hall and stepped onto the platform, where she officially announced the beginning of the magical academic exchange competition. The female students shouted excitedly, cheering for Rowan as he entered the hall, holding signs with his name on them. Rowan entered the hall with confidence, walking steadily amid the loud cheers from the audience. He and the Schwerin students exchanged serious looks as they prepared for the start of the competition. Daphne opened the event and explained the rules of the debate and how the topics would be presented. She clarified that each team would present a topic and conduct an open discussion about it using magical formulas. The first speaker was announced, Ali Marco, from Schwerin. Then the second speaker was announced from the Union School, Rowan. It was explained that Rowan would begin by presenting his topic first. Rowan introduced himself clearly and calmly to everyone. Ali Marco smiled with interest as Rowan began to speak, and Rowan announced that his first topic was telekinesis. The Schwerin students were visibly shocked and uncomfortable upon hearing the topic. One of the Schwerin students thought to himself that it was common in the first round to strongly showcase the institution's achievements. He added in surprise that Rowan had deliberately chosen a first-rank spell, telekinesis. A senior guest expressed frustration, saying this seemed like a serious misunderstanding and that it was absurd to attend just to witness such a basic level. Ali Marco clearly rejected the topic, saying telekinesis was not suitable, and accused Rowan of mocking them. Rowan responded calmly and politely, saying he never intended to insult anyone, and explained that while telekinesis is simple, it contains depth and complexity worth discussing. He added that dedicating effort to exploring the world's fundamental truths and principles is natural, and not a waste of time. as his opponent had claimed. Ollie Marco angrily asked which aspect of telekinesis Rowan wanted to discuss. Rowan, a bit puzzled, asked what Marco meant, then politely inquired about the topic Marco had prepared. Ollie Marco sarcastically suggested that since the level of the debate was so low, they could discuss fireball, and mockingly asked Rowan if that suited him. Marco continued with his sarcasm, saying the topic might be hard for Rowan but could be a good opportunity to learn some wisdom from his elders. Arthur noticed in surprise that Schwerin seemed to know a lot about Rowan's fire magic abilities. Rowan responded with a surprising proposal. How about they discuss both topics, telekinesis and fireball, together, which shocked everyone. Marco asked sarcastically what Rowan meant by combining the two topics. Rowan then began performing magic without chanting a spell, which greatly astonished the audience. Marco was stunned as he watched Rowan use magic without an incantation and thought to himself that he could do telekinesis too. Marco began quickly writing a complex magical formula on the board in front of everyone. The audience murmured in confusion, wondering what kind of spell Marco was writing. One student nervously said he believed what was happening was impossible. The scene ended with the audience tensely wondering if Rowan had actually managed to combine two spells at the same time in front of them. Finally, the moderator announced that each side would now explain their spell and begin discussion, starting with Schwerin's team. The Schwerin representative, Marco, began his speech by saying that the spells fireball and telekinesis were foundational and stabilized since the age of the great mages, and there was no room for modification or fusion between them. After Marco finished his explanation, Rowan was invited to present his own interpretation. Rowan calmly stepped up to the platform, ready to explain his perspective. He began by saying that telekinesis is a simple spell that anyone with mana control can use. He added that the core issue of the discussion was the spell's over-reliance on raw magical power. Rowan explained that he was inspired by Marco's suggestion and had successfully fused the telekinesis and fireball spells. Rowan demonstrated the first new spell, controlling a fireball using telekinesis. Then he presented the second spell, transforming an object moved via telekinesis into a fireball. Rowan ended his magical demonstration amid awe and astonishment from the audience. The Schwerin representative was utterly shocked by the strength of Rowan's magic. Arthur had already expected that anyone unfamiliar with Rowan's abilities would be completely stunned. It wasn't just Rowan's dazzling magic, but also the deep knowledge he possessed despite his young age. Marco began to struggle greatly to understand Rowan's explanation. Marco admitted to himself that he hadn't fully grasped what Rowan had said. Rowan concluded his talk politely, asking whether Marco had a different perspective or any additional points to explain. Marco felt tremendous pressure, unable to comprehend what had happened, and began trying to interpret the magical symbols. Internally, Marco insisted that he had to understand Rowan's explanation somehow. It would be humiliating to be outdone by a child. He decided to attempt casting the same spell Rowan had just performed, despite knowing how difficult it was. Marco began coughing from the strain and pressure of his failed attempt. Suddenly, he coughed up blood due to the overwhelming stress of trying to cast the spell. Everyone was shocked by the scene, and the Schwerin representatives expressed great concern. Rowan, too, was surprised and shaken by what had happened to Marco. Marco collapsed unconscious to the ground, amid collective shock and disbelief. The red elixir, which was the competition's grand prize, was brought forward. One of the Schwerin representatives congratulated Rowan and handed him the elixir, saying it had been a pleasure to witness such a debate. Bert gently advised Rowan not to use the elixir just yet, as taking it at a young age could cause side effects. Rowan agreed, saying he would use it later, closer to his graduation. Bert smiled and agreed with that decision. Rowan looked at the elixir thoughtfully and decided to wait another 2 years until his graduation. A beautiful garden appeared, filled with flowers and butterflies in a calm spring atmosphere. A girl introduced herself, saying her name was Rita. Rita added that she was a third-year student at the Union School. She said to herself that she had admired Rowan for a full 3 years. She added, affirming that everyone at the school admired Rowan. Rita admitted to herself that she still wasn't good enough for Rowan, but she felt that just watching him from afar was no longer enough for her. Rita finally decided to confess her feelings to Rowan on the last day of their third year. Rita was surprised when Rowan simply replied, "Sorry." Rowan calmly explained to her that, to him, love meant holding on to the people who had left, in his heart. Rita felt afraid and asked Rowan in confusion why he said that. Rowan continued, saying that true love often resembles the symptoms of a mental illness. He explained further that he wasn't denying her feelings at all, and that they might very well be real. But he said that what Rita felt might just be admiration or excitement, caused by certain circumstances. He emphasized that her feelings were likely closer to admiration than to true love. He gently asked her to look into her heart with honesty. Rowan added kindly that he was always open to talking with her if she truly believed she still loved him. Rita felt shocked and confused by what Rowan had said, and thought to herself that her mind felt suddenly clear, as if she had been hit. She walked back down the corridor, saying to herself that today she had been rejected by the person she had loved for 3 years, and yet she affirmed that she had no regrets. She told herself that confessing to someone you love is a brave and deeply meaningful act. And in the end, Rita concluded that her first love, and her third year, had come to an end with the spring breeze.